Good. Welcome everyone to today's meeting of full council. As you will have been told or will have worked out, I'm very sorry to say that Mark, the Lord Mayor, is unable to join us today because he has recently tested positive with COVID. I had a word with Mark yesterday and a very quick word just now. He is, I think it's fair to say, in pretty good condition, apart from being distinctly hacked off. And I can't say as I blame him, but I'm sure colleagues will join me in sending best wishes, and in also noting that both times I spoke to Mark, he assured me that he will be watching us. Indeed, he's watching us even now. So he, exactly, he may be absent in body, but he's very definitely present in spirit. As I say, colleagues, that means that I will be chairing for the whole of this meeting. Just to run over a few probably quite well-known points at the opening, but ones which are worth reiterating. We are, of course, following COVID-safe practices. I hope that colleagues will forgive me if I remain mainly unmasked, because that makes it a darn sight easier to chair the meeting. Also, you should be aware that, as well as being fully vaccinated, I had COVID 2 or 3 weeks ago, so I'm probably about as uninfectious as it is possible to get at the moment, and also rather immune. Of course, as ever, phones either off or on silent, and I will make sure that is the case with mine in a minute. The usual reminder, of course, to use the microphones when you're speaking, speak into them, and switch them off when you are done. As colleagues will be aware, we are being filmed and webcast live, so the usual controls over self-expression probably apply. The rules, as I understand it, are that members are allowed to leave the meeting and return to the meeting for whatever reason, and they don't have to announce as much, but they should indicate to the clerk in the event that they are leaving the meeting completely or permanently. I'm assuming and hoping that colleagues will be happy with what I think is our usual practice of breaking in give or take an hour and a half, around about 6:30, and breaking until 7 o'clock or thereabouts. We'll be resuming at any rate at 7. We will aim to have a half-hour break. Everyone happy with that? Excellent. There is one other announcement that I'm aware of that I should make before we get on to the body of the agenda, and that is an unambiguously happy piece of news, which many of you will have already observed. That is that our colleague, Councillor Catherine Miles, had a baby girl, Frida by name, on the 22nd of January. So she's, I think that makes her about 9 days old. And Frida is joining us for, I hope, the whole of this meeting. So congratulations. Well done, Catherine. Excellent. I'm informed that Frida is not, in fact, the youngest person to have attended a meeting of full council, as I believe Councillor Clarkson could give us details of in due course. Colleagues, if I may, I'd like to move on to the agenda proper, starting, of course, with apologies for absence. The Lord Mayor, of course, is among those. Councillor Brown, could you remind us of other colleagues who are absent to your knowledge?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So from our perspective, sorry, let me take my mask off. Councillor Ed Turner, Councillor Duncan Hall, Councillor Nadine Bielly-Summers, Councillor Mark Ligo, as you've indicated, and Councillor Paula Dunn. Okay, thanks very much, Susan. A few other colleagues who are running slightly late, but should be with us shortly. Understood. So some late-running colleagues as well. Andrew, yes, please.
Councillor Wade, although she may attend the last part of the meeting if trains permit.
Understood. Okay, thank you very much. Are colleagues aware of any other absences? No. Colleagues will have noted that there are a fair number of people absent, and of course that is partly a sign of the times that we live in, although not all, a good many of those just named are absent because they are self-isolating or have tested positive for COVID. My intention, and I thought it was worth indicating this at an early stage, is that when we come to questions to Cabinet members, in the event that a questioner is absent, but has signalled that they wish to ask a supplementary question through a colleague, I intend to allow that. And I believe that is at the discretion of the chair, and it's something I intend to allow. I don't expect it actually to happen terribly much, but I thought it worth flagging up right at the start. Second item, declarations of interest. May I hear from any colleagues who wish to declare interest in any of the items on the agenda? Yeah. Councillor Brown, Susan, yeah.
It's not a formal interest, but I will be absenting myself from the chamber during the discussion of the motion on the John Radcliffe Hospital because I work there. But I obviously have no pecuniary interest. I do not have a staff parking permit. I do not have the right to have a staff parking permit. But I think it's probably easiest if I'm not part of that debate. So I will absent myself from the chamber at that point.
Okay, thank you very much, Susan. That's nice and clear. Do I see any other declarations of interest for any point in the agenda? I am seeing none. I should like to move on to item 3, minutes. We have 2 meetings whose minutes we are looking at, both on the 29th of November, so the special meeting and the ordinary meeting. Our business is to approve the minutes as a correct record. Are we happy to do that, colleagues? Splendid, splendid. Item 4, appointments to committees, non-notified, and I am not aware that anyone is planning on notifying them in the immediate. I'm seeing no dissent from that, and so we move on to item 5. Item 5, announcements. Obviously, the Lord Mayor is not able to make any announcements. I had a quick chat with Mark, who couldn't think of anything immediate that he wished to announce, and so he agreed that he will give us full account of what he's been up to, which as ever has been prodigious amounts, at the next opportunity, the next available council meeting. Speaking briefly for myself as Deputy Lord Mayor, as you can imagine, colleagues, it's been a relatively quiet period over Christmas and the New Year, especially given the COVID situation, although, and quite frankly, it feels as though it was about 8 months ago now, I did attend a number of very agreeable pre-Christmas events, including, for example, a crisis service in the University Church. But as I say, all that seems a very long time ago. However, extremely worthwhile and, as ever, hugely enjoyable. Sheriff, do you have anything to
Just one short notice, Deputy Lord Mayor. A week and a half ago, I and other city councillors, in fact, attended a very well-attended demo about stop sewage pollution, end sewage pollution. It took place on Port Meadow. There were some very fine speakers, but nobody slated from the City Council. And I thought, given that we'd passed the motion in October 2020, somebody ought to say something. So I got on my hind legs and for about 30 seconds just abrogated to myself the role of sheriff to just point out that I had counted at least 12 city councillors present, including yourself, of course, Deputy Lord Mayor, and just made that clear that the city council was well represented. And I thought the opportunity to do that in a non-party way was to do that wearing a sheriff's hat, as it were, but I hadn't been invited as such.
Absolutely, fair enough. Thank you, Dick. That especially given the location of the event, makes very good sense. Colleagues, I'm seeing Councillor Clarkson, I think, indicating, and I'm happy to hear from her if colleagues are happy.
Yeah, just to thank Dick for speaking there. It was really good to see so many councillors from every party there, and it was quite clear from what people were saying that this was unanimous and it was entirely cross-party, and so should it continue so that we put pressure on Thames Water. But thank you for speaking, Dick.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Leader of the Council, any announcements? Chief Executive, Chief Finance Officer, Chief Monitoring? No. Anthony, City Rec.
Thank you very much, Deputy Lord Mayor. Good evening, everybody. As we may be aware, yesterday was the anniversary of the execution of Charles I in 1649, but I thought I would go on with happier royal news. As we will be aware, next Sunday, Her Majesty the Queen is celebrating the 70th anniversary of her accession. And I wondered if I may read out a quote from her about leadership, because all of you exercise leadership so wonderfully well. I know of no single formula for success, but over the years I have observed that some attributes of leadership are universal and are often about finding ways of encouraging people to combine their efforts, their talents, their insights, their enthusiasm, and their inspiration to work together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Anthony, as ever, was very well worth bearing in mind in our position. Thank you. I believe that is all on item 5. Item 6, public addresses on matters for decision. There are none. Item 7, the Strategic Grants Review, agenda page 35, and I believe Councillor Aziz is to speak to this.
Yes, hello. Good evening, everyone. So this report lays out the findings and recommendations and the implementation plan following the grants strategic review. A lot of work has gone into the grants review, and we've been conducting listening exercises and reaching out to communities. Obviously, this has been difficult because of COVID, but I'm very proud to say that our consultations have been running well. We have aimed to work collaboratively with members of the community and also members in the Chamber as well. And I'd like to thank everyone involved in the cross-party group focus on the grants review and for your constructive input in dealing with the many challenges that we face. These challenges are increasing and they're going to be going on for some time. Obviously, COVID is just one of the challenges, but we know that council budgets, including our own, remain very tight, and community organisations are working very hard, harder than ever. Many are facing burnout. You've already been talking about the number of people absent, some because of COVID. These are very, very challenging times. So the report is before you, so I won't go into all the details, but I just wanted to point out a few of the highlights. The first is that we are ring-fencing funding for the commissioning of advice centres across our city. We know that advice centres are often the first port of call for the most vulnerable in our wards and across the city, and this has definitely been the case because of COVID. We've done the same for homelessness services. I think this is really important. There's been many a time in this chamber when we've come here to raise huge concern about what's going on in our city with regards to people who are homeless. So I think that's very good news. We've been doing the same for services that are there to assist those who are impacted from domestic abuse. And we know overwhelmingly those people happen to be women and children as well. We have to achieve £200,000 in saving from the council grant, which obviously is not easy. We do not want to cut funding for any of the great organisations who work across our city day in, day out, but this is the reality that we're facing. And we are doing this in a collaborative way, in a respectful way. I'm pleased to say that we've had a lot of very good feedback and communication with organisations across the city. And also want to refer to Table 1, just to point out that following constructive conversations with other councillors and our advice centres, we are reviewing the £25,000 saving that we initially suggested, and we are working hard to identify an alternative way to achieve the savings that doesn't impact the advice centres. This is ongoing work and will continue up until the budget is finalised. I just also want to highlight the Community Impact Fund, which has a total budget of £558,000. This has now been established. Again, I'd like to thank members in the Chamber across the different parties who've been working on this with us. We acknowledged... Can I just quickly wrap up? Brilliant. Okay, I'll wrap up. So we are continuing to take feedback from people, especially those community organisations who are not familiar with the, shall I call it bureaucracy, dare I call it that, or the processes, and we are working to make the forms far more simpler for people to be able to use. So I think I'll wrap up there because the findings of the reports and the details are there for everyone to see, but thank you very much.
That's great. Thank you very much, Councillor Aziz. I believe we need a seconder, and I'm seeing Councillor Brown. Any colleagues wishing to speak to this report? Councillor Smerton.
My Liberal Democrat colleagues and I can't support the measures that are proposed today. While there are some welcome elements in what's proposed, it's simply the case that it persists in proposing the cut to the funding for the city's advice centres. We were just told that that money is ring-fenced, but the report that is in front of us, and which we're asked to vote for, says that amount is being reduced. And we are told that it is being reviewed, but I'd suggest that reviewed isn't good enough. It's a small amount, and if it is intended to walk that back, then that ought to be done in the paper rather than have us vote to authorize a reduction which may then hopefully perhaps get reversed. These centres play an important role in connecting people in difficult circumstances with council services and outside assistance. The amount that's being proposed to cut is trivial in the context of the city's budget, 25,000 against tens of millions. And yet the impact could be outsized. The centres themselves presented us with a report at Scrutiny, and I believe they also presented the same report to Cabinet, saying that they would be able to see 400 less people per year based on the cut that is proposed. How many of those people would need to end up in a terrible situation or even on the streets before that cut would be far from justified? Surely the answer must be just one. There have been a lot of opportunities for the administration to walk this cut back. Those who work on the annual budget will know that figures in the scale of hundreds of thousands have become available, which weren't a sure thing even a month ago. There have been a lot of chances to walk that cut back. Restoring the pot to its original value won't break the bank, but it could just change lives. So I would urge councillors to withhold their support on this occasion and ask that this be reconsidered and the paper brought back to council appropriately amended.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. I'm seeing Councillor Gant and Councillor Wolfe. Councillor Gant got in there.
Thank you very much, Deputy Lord Mayor. I'd just like to make 2 points about the Community Impact Fund. Firstly, this is a cut. I mean, we live in very difficult times, but let's be clear about that. And in some of the papers around this, one of the justifications given was to encourage organisations to explore match funding, other sources of income. And I'm sure it wasn't meant like this, but I hope everybody in this chamber, well, I know for certain that everybody in this chamber is very well aware that that is exactly what the many wonderful charities in our city do all the time anyway. And it's kind of difficult to see how they could do more of it or get more out of a diminishing and much needed pot. My second point, which is really a question, is whether the Cabinet member is entirely happy with the timescales which are referred to in the figure table 2 on page 46 of our main agenda. Because I can tell you that a charity that I'm aware of, I won't name it because I haven't got explicit permission to do so, did express concern about this. The public information campaign started on the 20th of December. This particular organisation heard about it on the 17th of December. The deadline was the 5th of January. Well, you know, we all know what happened between those two dates. That was felt to be difficult. There was a short extension, but still produced considerable difficulty. So is the Cabinet member content that the timescales for introducing this were as helpful to the organisations that we all want to help as they could have been?
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. I've seen Councillor Wolfe, I've also seen Councillor Brown. I appreciate that Councillor Gant asked a question, but I shall, with permission, leave you to answer that, Councillor, in your summation. Councillor Wolfe, please.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Welcome the announcement about the advice centres. It puts us in a bit of a spot. We haven't had a chance to discuss that, so I think we're going to have to vote our own way on that. I'm minded to support myself because of that slight switch. Just wanted to make a brief point about the ward member spend budget, which is being cut, partly the reason given due to underspend on it. I'm an old lag. I've been on the council for quite a while, but I can remember the days when we had area committees in East Oxford. It was called the East Area Parliament. Just want to flag up that at least in East Oxford, I mean, those area committees had a budget of £50,000, I think, if I remember right, which could be spent in the local patch. Because it also had first-tier planning powers, those committees were well attended, certainly in East Oxford. They were lively, well engagement. Officers came along to those meetings, and we were able to spend those budgets of £50,000 very effectively because it's an amount of money you can do something with. I seem to remember we launched the farmers market with that, and the car club in East Oxford, things like that. And I think there's a bit of a problem that the ward member spend budgets have been actually so low, it's very difficult to find things to do with them. I think we're going to manage it this year, but it was a loss, a much lamented loss of not only local democracy, but actually local discretion, as it were, that loss of those committees. And most of the members present won't even be aware that they existed, so I thought I should mention it.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Wolfe. Councillor Brown, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. In the absence of the portfolio holder for finance, I just wanted to make a couple of points. One is that I think we were extremely unusual as a council in having such a very generous grants budget, which we have not cut over many years now. And I think that I would just like to remind Council that we are continuing to maintain that very large grants budget, more or less, and as the portfolio holder has already said, you know, I think we will be reviewing this at the next budget council meeting as well. But I think it is important to note that, and that is a reflection of the importance that we give to the many good voluntary organisations across our city and the good work that they do. But it's also because of the responsible attitude that this council has taken to its finances over many years. So that even at a point where we are in a very difficult budgetary situation, we are still able to make this commitment to the citizens of Oxford. And I just wanted to make sure that everyone recognised the fact that this is pretty unusual in local government circles at the moment, and a reflection of the good work of council officers and the decision making that we as a council have made over some many years now. So thank you to Nigel Kennedy and his team for the amazing work that they have been doing on our finances, because that is how we are able to make these decisions. But it is also really important to reflect that this is about the values of our organisation and the fact that we do value those organisations across our city so greatly.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Any other colleagues wishing to speak on this? Then Councillor Azib.
Thank you. So just again for clarity, what I actually said is that the commissioning funding for advice centres is ring-fenced. That's what I actually said. The other point is that, as Councillor Brown has said, the council's budget will be set at the budget council meeting, and up until that deadline we are busy having very constructive conversations with a whole group of organisations about this budget. They're working in unison with us, and that includes the volunteers who are responsible for running our advice centres. On the point about the deadline for the budget for the Community Impact Fund, that deadline was indeed extended, and it was extended because of the feedback that we received and the feedback that we were listening to. And then on the ward budget point, I'd just like to say that your points have absolutely been noted and observed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I should like to move to a vote on this. All those in favour of item 7, please show. Thank you, Andrew. Those against? And abstentions? Okay. Passed. Moving on to item 8, page 97 of the main agenda, Integrated Performance Report for Quarter 2. Councillor Brown, I think, is probably moving this.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I will, in the absence of the portfolio holder, move this report. I think the important thing to say to Council is that the main reason this is here is because of the expenditure which is being authorised, if Council approves, by this particular report, which I think is entirely to be welcomed, and I'm sure Council will welcome it. And that, in a sense, has already been approved by Council in principle, and it is within our budget, but because it is a large sum of money, it is being brought back to Council. So this is about additional money for housing for homeless families. So I think something that everybody in this council chamber would welcome. And as it makes clear in the report, there was an original report submitted to Cabinet on the 15th of September, which gave approval for a scheme to purchase properties for the housing of homeless families. And that was funded by a £2 million investment from council resources, with a £2 million matched funding from DLUHC, as we now have to call it. And that, following a successful bid application, we have now got that money, and therefore this report comes back to Council in order to allow us to spend that money. So I'm hoping that Council can agree the report.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor. We'll need a seconder, who I'm seeing Councillor Hollingsworth. I see Councillor Smith, Ross Smith, in the first place.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Similar report came to the Audit and Governance Committee last week, in fact, actually, and it was noted the slippage on the capital programme and so forth, and the corporate risk red rating that we have of three there. We have 3 red ratings for corporate risk. There was a brief discussion about corporate risks and what should be included and what not should be included. And I'd like to ask the Cabinet member, or in his absence if I could, the Leader of the Council, please, would she agree that the corporate risk register should also include external things to what this Council can actually have influence or mitigation over, because it is important actually to get all the risks for the corporate risk strategy to be on the agenda for them.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I'm happy for the Leader to respond now, unless other colleagues are wanting to jump in with
I was actually
questions.
going to ask Nigel if he'd like to respond to that one, because without having been present for the discussion, I feel that it probably would be unwise for me to venture into that one without Nigel's advice.
Sure. I'm happy, in that case, to call Nigel, if I may.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The discussion of audit and governance, basically, I think there was general agreement that we would make reference to the risk management report, within the risk management report, to those areas that the Council has complete influence over in terms of risks, and those areas that it doesn't actually. So there will be reference in the reports going to audit and governance in future.
Fine. Thank you very much, Nigel. Any other questions, observations from colleagues? I am not seeing any. This too is a matter for a vote, so I should like people to display if they are willing to support this going through. It is carried unanimously. Excellent. Thank you very much, Andrew. Moving on to item 9, decisions taken under part 9.3 brackets B of the Constitution. Councillor Brown again, I believe.
Yes. I always find these ones a bit odd in that it's me kind of presenting a report which is a decision made by the Chief Executive, but obviously those decisions are made in discussion, after discussion with Cabinet members. So this particular decision was about a restructure of the joint venture that we have between City Council and Nuffield College, and that's all there is to say, really. It's about a restructure of the relationship, but I'm sure that Caroline can answer any detailed questions if people have any.
Splendid. Thank you very much. Again, I believe it technically needs to be seconded, and Councillor Hollingsworth got in there just before. Any questions or comments on this matter, which I believe we are to note, rather than anything else? I'm not seeing anybody. I think we probably have to vote on whether we note it. Is that accurate? So, all those in favour of noting item 9? It's another unanimous decision. Good, thank you very much. Item 10, Cabinet minutes, and we have, in fact, only one Cabinet meeting from the 15th of December to consider. Details on agenda page 117. 15-minute time limit, I would remind colleagues, and I would be interested to find out whether any colleagues wish to ask questions concerning these minutes. Do I have any takers? I'm currently seeing nobody, in which case gone. Item 11. Questions on notice from members of council. We start off, as colleagues are aware, we'll be going through this by Cabinet members. We kick off with what is officially LU1. Councillor Jarvis to Councillor Upton. Any supplementaries, Councillor Jarvis?
No supplementary.
Thank you very much. DW2, so Councillor Walcott, who is absent. Sorry, it's such a long list of people who are absent that I keep assuming everybody's on it. Councillor Malik, in that case, to Councillor Walcott. Any supplementaries?
Just very brief. Thank you very much for your reply, but I'm disappointed in a slow response because Oxford City Council made a promise, headline and everything. We were supposed to be housing the 10 refugee families, and unfortunately only done 3. And what I've been looking at, in addition, 7 properties are in pipeline, although some will be later in the year. So it's all right for us to claim and make the headlines. When it comes to deliverance, I'm sorry, deliverance is very disappointing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Malik. Councillor, would you like to respond?
Yeah, I would like to respond. I think we're all disappointed that we haven't been able to house as many Afghan refugees as we desire. In fact, I think everyone in the room is very disappointed that people are in this crisis, and it's not a time to making political point scoring, but actually it's really important that we do get those houses, and we actually do have that happen, but unfortunately not enough people have actually come forward with homes, and we are working as hard as we can. Officers are working tirelessly, and I don't think there's a single person here that's not committed to that happening and would like that this to happen sooner, but unfortunately it hasn't. And actually I sit here as a child of refugees, so it's really important to me that people do have a home and do have social housing. And unfortunately it is sad, it is a burden on all of our hearts, but I would like to see it happen faster. But again, as been said, we haven't had people come forward fast enough, we haven't had people come forward with adequate properties, and we haven't actually had that kind of uptake in the way that we truly desire. And we have worked with the universities, and we are still pushing and knocking on doors. So actually, if anyone has any more solutions and are able to do something, please do, because it's not like we're sat here wanting people to stay in accommodation that isn't fit for them. So that's my response.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. Next question is Councillor Jarvis, again, to the same Cabinet member.
No supplementary.
No supplementary. Thank you very much, Councillor. Moving on to MR. Questions to Councillor Rowley. MR1 from Councillor Miles to Councillor Rowley. Any supplementaries, Councillor? I see none. Next one, Councillor Pegg. Again, any supplementaries? There are none. Actually, the next one's yourself, Councillor Pegg, and, oh, yes, the next 2. Any supplementaries to any of them? That makes life nice and simple. Thank you. Next question, questions to Councillor Clarkson. MC1, Councillor Miles, once again to Councillor Clarkson.
Just a supplementary, but just on this is a broad street cycle route. I'm just wondering whether the city will be willing to work with the county to fit events into the Broad Meadow sort of spatial configuration so that a clear cycle route can be kept free, or find alternative sites for events as opposed to just encouraging cyclists to sort of step down from their bikes and walk through. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor.
Thanks, and congratulations on birth of Frida. Lovely to see her here today. Yes, it is definitely our aspiration that we would always do everything we can. But as I said in the answer to the question, we treat each case on its merits. So sometimes if it's a one-off event, for example, the half marathon, and where it will be difficult to move it somewhere else, we would say, well, it's for a shorter period of time, and so we would allow it. But yes, that is very definitely our aspiration. But we wouldn't want to say at this stage that every event has to enable cycle access, although that would always be our desire. So it's a question of balancing the pros and cons of events. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councillor. MC2, Councillor Jarvis, Councillor Clarkson, concerning the grapes on George Street.
No supplementary.
No supplementary. Thank you very much, Councillor. MC3, Councillor Wolfe to Councillor Clarkson.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Yes, I do. I'm not sure whether it's a supplementary. Exactly, because Mary hasn't actually answered the last paragraph question about gender inclusivity. So we've got an update on public toilets, which is great. But this recent one about gender inclusivity, of course, has only recently been put firmly on the agenda following the recent council motion, and it's not addressed in the Tourism Management Review Group, of which I was a member. We slipped up there, I guess. Nor, so far as I know, was it mentioned in the councillor's briefing in 2019. It clearly has implications for both the community toilet scheme and the provision of public conveniences. And so the sooner it's taken on board, the better, given that the whole issue is now under review, as the answer says. So will Councillor Clarkson commit to including this concern about addressing gender-inclusive toilets in the reviews taking place?
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Clarkson.
Yep. Thanks, Dick. What I would point out is that under the 2010 Equalities Act, people are able to go to whichever toilets whichever gender they identify with. I think the main issue actually is for people who are non-binary, because they're forced to make a decision at the moment. But I know that certainly there've been issues, there've been movements within some of the colleges to make all their toilets non-binary. And I think that when we have a review, and if we're looking at more provision and working with the community toilet scheme, that's really important that we do that. Okay, thanks. I think Councillor Aziz may...
Happy for that to happen if that is the case.
About some work you're doing with trans community?
No, that's okay. Thank you. Well, I think it's really important that these issues are being raised and being taken very seriously by our City Council, and I appreciate the work that's being done on it, and I absolutely agree that this should be included in the tourism strategy, and indeed across the board as well. And I know we have a public address about trans issues coming up, so I think it's important that this is being raised continuously, and just to thank everyone for their work.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor. MC4, Councillor Ros Smith. Any supplementary?
Thank you. Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Clarkson, for the very full response. I asked the question because one of my local schools has been put to quite a lot of expense and inconvenience by last-minute cancellation of swimming lessons. Indeed, I think the last one was less than 24 hours notice, so they had the costs of cancelling coaches and so forth up to the Marston Ferry link, Marston Ferry pool there as such. Your answer mentions helping with the costs, and yes, that's right, £775 cost for becoming a fully qualified swim teacher, but it mentions free training for the current Frisian team, which is great, but I know they're still advertising quite widely and saying that this is what it will cost. Is the council prepared to put any money towards paying for perhaps an enthusiastic person who does want to take on this position and this job to help Fusion, so that we can have our children taking swimming lessons and also have our schools not put to inconvenience and cost because of cancellation of swimming lessons? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clarkson.
Thanks very much, and I think we would be prepared to look sympathetically at that if enthusiastic people came forward. I have taken up with Fusion the fact that lessons have been cancelled at short notice, and I know that it's been very difficult with staff shortages and with COVID, but I have said that the absolute priority has been to give maximum amount of communication. You know, if people understand when lessons are cancelled because people are ill, what they are angry about is when they turn up at a swimming pool only to be told when they turn up that the lesson's cancelled, and it's been made quite clear to Fusion that they need to sharpen up on communication. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. One councillor to the absent Councillor Turner. That's from Councillor Wade. Are colleagues aware of a supplementary? Apparently not, so that was straightforward. Questions to Councillor Hayes. Question TH1 from Councillor Malik. Any supplementaries, Councillor?
Yeah, thank you. My question is, how many times I need to ask the portfolio holder to give us basically the figures? He gives a very good answer saying Oxford Council acted quickly to install the additional air quality filter. Great. And then equally, then he goes on to paragraph say, and the county council is publishing this stuff about the LTN, which is expected towards end of the February, and the scheme's final evaluation. If my understanding is correct, he can correct me if I'm not right, the pollution data is monitored by city council. If it's monitored by county, then I'd be asking the wrong people. So normally it's very straightforward. If somebody, member of public, can write FOI request, they can get the data, and they can then get onto Councillor Tail and saying, look what's happening here. And here is council who got the data. Why you're not giving us the figures? All we're asking for the figures.
Thanks, Councillor. I think there's three brief things to say. The first is that you're asking for data over a particular time period, and for that data to be robust, we need to be able to present it to you with all of the context and all the analysis of it. So we could just give you data left, right and centre from day 1, day 3, day 75, but unless it's actually based within a context and analysis, it'll be meaningless. And that's important because we need to hold the trust of people who are relying on that data in order to make their minds up about key decisions. The second thing to say is that you've asked various questions various times about LTNs, and I completely acknowledge that, but I'm not entirely certain that you've asked for air quality data a lot of times. So I don't want to give the impression that you're asking for it lots of times and we're not providing it to you. And then the third thing to say is to refer you back to the answer I've given, which is at the end of February, you'll receive one set of information, and then towards the summer, you'll receive a second set. So we've explained why we can't give it to you now. We've said to you that it's not about you constantly asking and us not giving. And we've also identified when you'll receive the data with the necessary context and analysis. So hopefully that will give you reassurance that you'll get the information you need and it'll be in the right way.
Thank you, Councillor. Question TH2, Councillor Wade to Councillor Hayes, Seacourt Extension, and I believe there is a supplementary on Councillor Wade's behalf.
Yes, and thank you for permission to ask it on her behalf, Deputy Lord Mayor. It's quite simple. How is it possible that on the same day the Seacourt Park and Ride extension can be closed because there is no demand, and the Westgate car park is closed because it's full?
Well, it's just quite simple. There's no demand for the park and ride, which is why it's still closed. I can't give you any more information than that.
TH3, Councillor Miles to Councillor Hayes, domestic air pollution. No supplementary. Councillor Miles, yours are the next two questions as well. Air pollution from licensed premises and licensed taxi cycle rank revision. And no supplementaries on either, thank you. TH6, Councillor Gant to Councillor Hayes, Broad Street into vibrant public space.
Yes, thank you. It was good of the councillor to tell this council why the county council has made a decision that it did. For the record, the reason is because it's committed to the priorities that it set out in the principles of the Oxfordshire Fair Deal Alliance. I did ask about the permanence of cycle routes through Broad Street during City Council sponsored and licensed events. Councillor Clarkson answered that fully, for which I'm grateful in her response to a supplementary a little earlier. But it is an important matter, this, and it has other implications as well to do with issues around St Michael's Street. So really, I just try and get a straight answer to my question, which is, can I assume that Councillor Hayes endorses the comments that Councillor Clarkson made, having not answered my question himself?
Thanks. I do endorse what Councillor Clarkson said, but it's a bit peculiar that you're coming to this council to ask this question, because it's the county council which is responsible for the implementation of this scheme. We've introduced Broad Meadow, which shows what can happen on Broad Street. We saw over 100,000 people come to that space. It was so successful that we extended it, and the scheme overall won an Oxford Preservation Trust award. And the City Council, through the officers that we have and the expertise and the enthusiasm they've got for a pedestrian approach, a permanent pedestrian approach on Broad Street, are willing to step up and help. But I really would urge you to go and talk to your own county council cabinet member and to ask him to introduce this on a swifter timescale and to work with him in a collaborative fashion. And it may well be that the county administration have set an ambition to pedestrianise Broad Street, but it's also the case that we have advocated for that repeatedly, and I had to amend your own motion in order that we could provide for the pedestrianisation of Broad Street permanently on a swift timescale.
Thank you, Councillor. TH7, Councillor Malik to Councillor Hayes. Any supplementary? And also on TH8, pollution levels on Hollow Way.
Absolutely. Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor.
You're welcome.
Let me just correct my fellow councillor where he says the previous one. Yes, I did ask for the pollution data before. If your memory is not, I can get the minutes on the previous meeting. And
question on the correct question, please.
Question is very clear on this one. I appreciate his answer, but the answer is not good enough, because when he says basically talk about Holloway and this 2 months cannot be revealed, the bottom line is these are the people I represent. I'm more worried about their health. Even 1 day pollution is bad enough if you believe people have a right in a clean air and live pollution-free city. And when you talk about this ZEZ, yes, of course I welcome, but ZEZ, not a zero, is not a nil. You can just pay the certain council like a mafia tax. You can still drive the grass guzzler into the street. So this is not the right thing. So what you're telling is people will pay, they can still drive in there. So on the ZEZ, could you tell us the buses going through Queen Street will be all electric?
Thanks, Councillor. We've got a bid in to government under the Zebra bus bid, which you can see in the final paragraph of my answer, and that's in order to bring forward the funding. We talk about some tens of millions of pounds that need to come into the city in order to electrify the bus fleet. We already have up to 5 electric buses in the city, which we managed to secure by working with government to bring that funding into the city. And I think 115 Euro 6 engine buses, which are increasingly running across the whole of the city centre, but a larger geography as part of the bus low emission zone. So the point that you're making is around, are we doing enough to clean up our bus fleet? We've already brought forward significant investment to do just that, and we're aiming to bring yet more money in to go even further. And if we were to bring that money in, we'd be the second all-electric bus city after Coventry, which would be a significant investment. And that will only come into the city if we continue to be ambitious. If we set those tough air quality targets as we have, if we work with our partners to try and become a zero carbon city by 2040 or sooner, and if we bring forward the ZEZ in February, and also then extend it swiftly after. So ambition really does matter. And the last thing that I want to say is that I agree entirely with you. We need to have the cleanest possible air because we know that breathing in dirty air has harmful health impacts. But we also need to make sure that when we're presenting the data around the impacts of measures on air pollution, we do it in the most evidence-led way, that we trust in the science, and that people can also trust in what we say, which is why we want to make sure that we're doing this in a robust way.
Thank you, Councillor. Question TH9, Councillor Wolfe to Councillor Hayes. Any supplementary?
I have no supplementary on that one, Deputy Lord Mayor, nor do I on the second one, for which I'd like to thank Councillor Hayes for a helpful reply, and I hope that trial works.
I think, Councillor, that you have a third question, TH11, which is on pivot power-led Oxford Energy Super Hub.
Perhaps I could have kept it simple. No, I don't have a supplementary on that either.
Splendid, splendid.
Next one?
Thank you very much, Councillor. Moving on to questions to Councillor Arshad. Councillor Malik, question LA1, Temple Cowley LTN. Any supplementaries?
Yes. It is a lengthy answer. Obviously, Councillor Hayes will answer that. The reason I was put it to Councillor Arshad was because she's also on the cabinet. But however, I'm very happy to take a response from Councillor Hayes. My problem is, the reason I put these questions, because you are the guys before the election stood on the manifesto, you supposed the LTNs. So when the LTN comes in, then you and your leader write to the county council to delay, okay? And then we can go. I mean, you got the numbers there. You are the one who running big coalition in the county council. Let's have the clear answer and direction to the people of Oxford. One day you say one thing, and the other day, if you had a manifesto pledge, let's.
Councillor, I believe we need this to be a question, and one preferably directly addressed to Councillor Arshad, who was the...
No, it's Councillor Hayes is
okay,
going
understood.
to
Well,
answer.
if colleagues are happy for that to be the case. So question, if you don't mind, Sarge.
Yeah, the question is equally in the last paragraph when it says, I and the leader has written to the county. So why would you write to the county council to deferment when you are up for it? In this very council, when we have elected the motion, Councillor Hayes said, Labour council had broken their back to talk to the people. If the people want it, the county council want it, what's the problem with the city council?
I believe I heard a question.
Thank you for the question. I just want to start by saying that Councillor Arshad was eager to respond to your question. She's been advocating on behalf of her local residents, both as a councillor and as a cabinet member, and she goes around talking frequently to her residents in order to hear what they have to say. But it's typical that the question that is put goes to the person with the relevant portfolio. But I'm sure if you want to speak to Lubna, feel free to drop her an email. She loves that. The specific answer to your question is, do we say one thing and then change our minds the next day? We campaigned at the election to say that LTNs are an effective tool of traffic management, and we support them in that sense. We've also passed motions in this council, which have been backed by, I think, you alongside Labour councillors, saying that we believe that LTNs are just one tool in the toolbox. There's plenty of other tools that we can use. We're not ideological about LTNs. We just want to achieve our goals, and LTNs are one way to get there. So when it is apparent to us that the bus service providers are concerned about the introduction of LTNs in East Oxford, including in my ward, and that they think that one possible impact could be a further delay of their buses, which are already going through the toughest times they know because of the pandemic, it is right that this City Council listens to the bus service providers and that we make our minds up on the basis of that. Now, the County Council have taken a different decision, and they'll be introducing the East Oxford LTNs, and we will do all that we can to make a success of them for the residents there, but also to ensure that bus services are viable and continue to flow without disruption or delay, so that we can have a properly connected and well-funded bus network. So I think what you're saying here is, why are you writing to the County Council expressing the concerns of bus service providers? We're doing that because your residents want good buses. I think you're saying to us, why are you saying that you're in favour of LTNs? We're saying it because we want your residents to benefit from cleaner air. And you're saying to us, why aren't you bringing the data forward? We're saying we will, but we'll bring it forward in the right way so that your residents can trust the data.
Thank you, Councillor. Question LA2 is Councillor Malik once again, at least in principle, to Councillor Arshad. Any supplementaries?
And just to Councillor Hayes' information, I do speak to Libna, so that's fine. That's not an issue. The issue here is people elect you to serve. The answer, I'm still baffled. I mean, due respect to you guys, you know, the labour values and the social justice is all about £100,000 is boiled down to. And the time you have implemented this bulky charges when the people are struggling in a COVID, the people are struggling to make their end meets, and giving the idea there is no bulky item being stuck on the road. I think if Lubna hasn't seen my previous newsletter, I can very happily to pass to her. I go around also regularly. I just got a fridge removed last week again and the 2 mattresses in my...
Again, Sergeant, reminder that this does need to turn into a question.
Well, it is come to the question. So the bottom line is, I do not agree with the £100,000 figure. With due respect to, council can go and spend on other projects. So this should be in the need of provided, I believe, you should take these charges off in the budget and you should go back to free collection. That is the question.
Confess, I heard nothing which was obviously ending in the question mark, and as such, I can't see how the Cabinet member can
Deputy
answer.
Lord Mayor, apart from £100,000, why would they will not take these charges off?
Councillor Arshad.
Councillor Malik, I will get a written response to you if that's okay. Yeah.
Okay, understood. Thank you very much. LA3 is Councillor Wolfe to Councillor Arshad on TPOs. Any supplement?
Thank you. Yes, I do have a supplementary on this, although, again, it's trying to tease out what I see as a contradiction in the answer. This is a messy business, this notification of trees, and it's caused problems for us on our patch. The first paragraph of the reply seems to contradict the last paragraph of the reply. So the first paragraph says that works to trees and by implication this is all trees in conservation areas, whether they're on public or private land, works to trees in conservation areas require notification via the tree lists. That seems to be clear. But the last paragraph reads, whether on public land, there is an exemption for the local authority to have to provide prior notification. And I'm wondering whether it's this confusion, these two things that conflict with each other, that led to a large tree on public land on the edge of a conservation area being felled without warning, because that's what happened and why it's an issue. Councillors have been notified of concerns about the tree's health a couple of months before, but its felling came as a complete shock to us and to local residents and created problems. So could Councillor Arshad please tell me, or find out maybe, should councillors have been notified of the intention to fell that tree on the edge of a conservation area on public land? Should we have been notified of the intention to fell the tree or not?
Thank you, Councillor Wolfe. Can I update Councillor Wolfe that the planning team has confirmed that while works to trees in conservation areas require notification, there is an exemption where the trees are on public land being carried out by the responsible body. So in this case, ODS on the council's behalf. Nevertheless, while there is no requirement for councillors to be notified in advance, I would prefer that they did generally happen, and I will relay this to ODS.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor.
Yeah.
LA4, I believe, is Councillor Pegg to Councillor Arshad. Crowdfunding for tree planting. Any supplementary?
Thank you for this answer, Libna. And I saw it was really great to see that you were saying that crowdfunding could be a potential source of funding for trees in local areas. And so I was wondering if you would be willing to meet with community groups who are very enthusiastic about the idea of raising money to fund trees in their areas.
Thank you, Councillor Pegg. Yeah, I would love to do that. Thanks.
Councillor, and may I commend Councillor Pegg for a very, very clear question. Councillor Pegg is up next. Question AH1 to Councillor Hollingsworth. Again, any supplementaries, Councillor? Councillor Pegg, any supplementaries for your next one, which is to Councillor Hollingsworth. Local plan policies to protect diversity. And there are none on that. And AH2, that's you again, Councillor Pegg, and nothing on that. Councillor Wolfe. H3, next local plan review, brackets, donut economics. Any supplementaries?
Not on that one, thank you, Lord Mayor.
Oh, Councillor question H4, greenbelt protection. Councillor Wolfe.
Yes, I do on this one. Councillor Hollingsworth has chosen, and very wisely perhaps, not to express an opinion about the merging of Kidlington and Oxford across the greenbelt Water-Eaton Gap, saying only that the City Council will respond, quote, taking into account national and local planning policies in place at the time. Charwell District Council seems not to share my concern about the closing of the Water-Eaton Gap and quite content that the new Kidlington, Bedbrook, Yarnton conurbation should become part of Greater Oxford. I find myself wondering how long it will be before it will be possible to cycle the 16 miles from Steventon to Woodstock without ever leaving a built-up environment. I'm coming to a question. The Netherlands is a far more densely populated country than us. I've cycled across the country more than once, but have never had that experience there of just going through built-up environment. Is Councillor Hollingsworth content that neighbouring authorities make the decisions as to whether to merge the settlements across the Greenbelt with Oxford City, with the City Council having no view of its own? Do the views of Oxford's electorate not carry any weight in the matter, or is it just down to Charwell to decide whether to close the gap?
I found the original question quite odd, and I find this one even more odd. Not least because this has been quite a contentious matter that's exercised this chamber and many others over the last several years, and it seems to have passed Councillor Wolfe by to some extent. Maybe he was enjoying his cycle, I don't know. Anyway, the fact is that over a very prolonged period, the sites in question have been subject to public debate have been subject to a formal planning process through the making of the revised Cherwell local plan, to which this City Council made its contributions, and they're on public record and have been for some years. And Cherwell District Council, having been through that process, decided to allocate those sites for development to meet Oxford's unmet housing need, as did every other council in Oxfordshire. The view this council expressed repeatedly, and rightly in my view, was that while it was right for those councils to identify sites to meet Oxford's unmet need, and we're very grateful for that, it was up to those councils to identify which sites. It's not up to this council to say to other councils which sites they should and should not allocate for housing. So in the sense that you're talking about something that has already happened some time ago, and on which the City Council expressed its views, all of that is in the public domain and has been for some considerable time. You also asked about the Stratfield Brake site and the site on which Oxford United, thanks to their land deal with the County Council, have aspirations to move. This council, as a close-by planning authority, will be expressing its views on that. Those views will be expressed by professional officers, not by politicians, and they will do so having taken into account national and local planning advice. And I am not going to prejudice what those views will be now or indeed at any point.
Thank you,
I hope that's clear. But I do see that there is a plethora of stuff out there with a quick Google, you'll find a lot.
Splendid. Thank you, Councillor. AH5 is also Councillor Wolfe, to Councillor Hollingsworth, planning legislation, etc. Any supplementary?
Thank you. I hear the concerns. I'm inclined to agree. There may be complications with that. However, there was a further question. And I'm bringing it down, focusing on Oxford City. So looking at the city, where there's got this issue about what things look like compared with whether they help save human life on the planet, does Councillor Hollingsworth foresee future policy clashes between, on the one hand, the protection of heritage street scenes, and on the other, the need for greater insulation and renewable energy generation? And does he agree that Council will eventually need to prioritise between the two?
I do agree, and I think anyone who's sat on the planning committee recently, or any ward councillor with the conservation area, will know that these challenges are already arising. There are conflicts and there are tensions, but there aren't necessarily contradictions. So I'll use a hypothetical example based on one of my own ward, though I could pick one from Marston and so on. Our guidance, based on the Energy Saving Trust's guidance, is that you take a fabric-first approach to energy conservation. In other words, you try and use less energy before you try and generate more of it, and that's a particular sequence which is writ large in our planning processes. So what we encourage, particularly in conservation areas where there's quite clear, not just local but national guidance. When I say guidance, I mean law on how conservation areas and heritage assets should be protected, is that you should try and take an approach to reduce the energy use of the building before you start sticking solar panels on the top of it. Now, each planning application has to be treated on its merits. That's quite clear. But it is also clear that with the increasing urgency to move towards reductions in energy use and a shift to a zero carbon energy generation, then yes, I think those tensions will become more to the fore, and this council, I think, will need to look at its guidance, and I've already asked officers to update and expand the TAN, the technical advice note on this issue, which we publish later in the year. But yes, I can see how this is going to continue to be something that we'll need to tread very carefully on. But it's also at national level, and my answer to this question emphasised the challenges. The NPPF has very clear guidance on protecting heritage assets, and that may need to be changed in order to reflect different national as well as local priorities.
Thank you, Councillor Holsworth. Question AH6 is Councillor Miles, technically to Councillor Upton, but I see no supplementary. SB1, questions to Councillor Brown. Question SB1, Councillor Malik, any supplementaries, Councillor? Again, in the form of the question.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I appreciate the answer. In my question, I given the numbers which FOI some residents put it on the social media. My only question again is, if we ask the people to care about their health, and that's what they are giving the numbers out in the consultation, would you write to the county council to abolish this LTN? Yes or no?
Sorry, as you know, Councillor Malik, Councillor Hayes and I have already written to the County Council on the subject of LTNs and the importance of making sure that they're part of a strategic transport response. And I don't think we have anything to add to that letter.
Councillor Malik, you're up next as well for SB2 on Oxford LTN trial. Any supplementary?
Yeah, thank you very much. I appreciate my leader and a deputy leader giving the answer of this strategic invention they're trying to hold up and write to the county. And just let me give them the information as a local taxi driver. Those 3 areas where the East Oxford LTN is going to be implemented, they are very well serviced by the bus companies. So again, the question comes to it, apart from that intervention, why would you want to delay it? When your own deputy is saying they broke their back to talking to the people. Ifley Road is well served, Carvey Road is well served, Moral Avenue is well served with the bus service. I don't know what else bus service company can do, brought a helicopter or something. I mean, these are the buses are running up and down every 3 to 5 minutes. Yeah, the question is, why delay? I mean, because I respect the answer they given, the written to the county council, but in addition, what I'm saying is a well served, why would you still want to delay it?
So it's very good to hear that Councillor Malik is very firmly in favour of all of the LTNs in East Oxford. That wasn't quite my impression up until now, but I think, as has been expressed previously by both myself and Councillor Hayes, our concern is about the impact on bus services. We know that the bus services have had considerable impact from COVID and that bus passenger numbers have been down. And that has led to some existing bus cuts. And we have always argued that low traffic neighbourhoods are one measure amongst many, a useful one in terms of managing traffic in our city. But you need carrots and sticks when it comes to changing people's transport habits. And you need to make sure that the buses have got the ability to move smoothly through the city, and cyclists and pedestrians. All of these things are really important. Introducing one part of those plans in isolation may have not the effects that we want to see. So I think it is really important, and those were the points that we made in our letter, which I do commend you read, because I think it set it out quite nicely, that these things need to be introduced together. That's the approach that we took when we jointly agreed Connecting Oxford, and we think that that's the best approach to solving these problems in our city. We know we've got to reduce congestion, we know we've got to improve air quality. There are a number of measures that are available to us. We need to make sure that we are introducing them together so that they can support each other.
Thank you, Councillor. Question SB3 from Councillor Miles on the question of the day policy on babies in the council chamber. Any supplementary?
Yes, thank you. And I'd really like to say a big thank you to you all for being so welcoming, and for Oxford City Council's commitment to encourage women's political participation in elected office by allowing new parents and particularly breastfeeding mothers to bring their infants into the chamber. So this is necessary. Thank you. This is necessary because at the moment there's no legal right for parental leave for people in elected public office. And as of 2021, 3/4 of local authorities in England don't have any formal policies for paternity or maternity care for leave for councillors. So, given this context and given the council's progressive approach relative to other councils, I just wondered whether the council is willing to formally document this informal policy, first of all, and then maybe also consider looking at creating a formal parental leave policy that's applicable to all councillors as well. I understand that there is some policy that applies to cabinet position holders, but it would be great if we could explore looking at being more broadly available. Thank you.
Well, firstly, formally, congratulations, Catherine. We're all delighted to welcome our new sort of substitute member, additional member to the chamber. And as I said in my answer to you, this policy is not a new one. I mean, it actually goes back, I think, to the 1980s that we've been welcoming babies into this council chamber. So, even before my time on the council, in fact. So that's how far back it goes. In terms of your request, I'd have to take advice from Susan Sale, but I'm not sure whether we are actually allowed to do what you suggest under the Local Government Act. But I think that I'd be more than happy to ask the next review of the Constitution to see if there are any additional measures that we can take in order to support parents who might wish to take parental leave while they're on the council, including formalising the sort of practice that we've had over literally decades in terms of supporting parents to attend meetings and bring their children with them if they need to.
Thank you, Councillor. Susan, anything to add, or shall we leave this until any possible review? Thank you very much. SB4 is Councillor Gant to Councillor Brown on the OGNA. Any supplement?
Yes, thank you. Sorry, the Oxfordshire Growth Needs Assessment doesn't seem quite so exciting after that last exchange. Although I'd like to congratulate Councillor Miles on contributing to Oxfordshire's growth need. Later this year, this council, along with the other planning authorities, will get a vote on the text of the Oxfordshire Plan 2050 to go out to Regulation 19 consultation. That sounds rather nerdy, but it is an absolutely crucial decision for our county and will include a vote on the level of growth assumed in that text. It's vital that the evidence base underpinning it is scrutinised and challenged openly. We've already heard mention of the defence from Councillor Hollingsworth that these things go to planning inspectors, but planning inspectors are asked to judge on particular legal grounds whether something meets a test of soundness, not whether it is a good idea. In the interest of openness and accountability, what possible objection could there be to an independent review of the OGNA, which is an extremely long and complicated document, which, frankly, the residents of Oxfordshire need to engage with?
I don't actually think I've got anything to add to the answer that's there in writing in front of you, which I think sets out exactly the answer to your question.
Then we move on to SB5, which is Councillor Gant, again to Councillor Brown, Oxfordshire Plan 2050.
Yes, thank you. And this is about the role of the Scrutiny Committee in the progress of that decision towards the text, which will go out for consultation under Regulation 19 following a vote at this council. The future Oxfordshire Partnership Scrutiny Panel, which I have the honour of chairing, has been told that, quote, any decision will be taken following Scrutiny Committee consideration at the councils in the normal way. The normal way, in the spirit of the legislation, gives scrutiny committees unfettered ability to scrutinise and make recommendations on the text and all the supporting evidence, and not just note work that's been done elsewhere. And can the leader confirm that this is what the City Cabinet expects, and that the comments about decisions needing to be made in a coordinated manner won't be an excuse for not engaging with the scrutiny function?
Thank you, Councillor Gant. I mean, I think this is an absolutely fair question, because I think this is going to be a really difficult process to manage. total honesty about that, because we have got to try and come up with one document that is agreed by a number of different councils who may have different views on this. So it is not going to be an easy process to achieve that. But yes, I would expect there to be an opportunity for scrutiny committees in each council to properly scrutinise the document, come up with recommendations. Then it will be for those cabinets in each council to consider those recommendations. And at some point and somehow, we have also got to then reconcile any conflicting recommendations. So, this is not going to be a simple process. We all recognise that. But we do want to make it as an accountable and democratic a process as possible. And that definitely involves scrutiny, and it definitely involves decision-making resting with each individual council.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Question 39th and final, I believe, is Councillor Malik to Councillor Brown, multi-faith room at the Town Hall. Any supplementary?
Thank you very much. I agree the Town Hall is not big as airport. That was only just to give the model thinking what was asking. I appreciate your answer, obviously, due to the lack of space or anything at the Town Hall. Would the leader consider forming a cross-party group to look around at the Town Hall, see if there is any space can be available?
I'm not really sure what that would achieve, if I'm honest, Councillor Malik. I mean, I think we have looked at this in the past, and there just isn't. So, I don't think that forming a group is going to change the available space within the Town Hall. I think what the answer does make very clear is that we are always been cut off in my prime. Sorry, my microphone just failed. Oh, it's back on now. Okay. I think what we are very keen to do is to be able to support anybody who requires one to make a room available for them on a given day. I think the difficulty is making a permanent room available, or a room available permanently for that purpose. I absolutely understand the request for such a room, and we would always look sympathetically on people's desire to have a room available to them if they need it. It just might not be the same room on any given day. But that is a clear commitment from the Town Hall staff to make sure that people have a room available to them.
Thank you very much, Councillor. That is the last of the questions in that section. Colleagues will be aware that item 12, public addresses and questions, can only be taken at 7 o'clock or thereafter. I would therefore propose to colleagues that we move on in the minutes remaining until 6:30 to items following that. Item 13 is very straightforward because there are no reports on outside organisation, committee chaired reports, etc. Item 14, Scrutiny Committee report, and I believe Councillor Chapman, in the absence of Councillor Wade, is addressing this.
That's right, Deputy Lord Mayor. I'm here on behalf of Councillor Wade to give the report back on scrutiny. You've had a full report in front of you. I'm happy to take questions on it, but what I would say standing back is that there's been a very constructive dialogue between scrutiny members and the Cabinet, and you will see that on most occasions I think we have improved the quality of the proposals, and I'm glad to see that in most occasions the Cabinet has gracefully accepted the proposals we have put on the table. So it's very much in that spirit we're working together, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nigel. I see Councillor Gant.
I have two. Shall I do them together or separately?
I think that could be allowed, yes.
Okay. Well, the first one, you might like to refer me to the answer that I heard some moments ago, as they say in Parliament. At tomorrow's meeting, and this is obviously this is a report on scrutiny's work to date, rather than looking forward to the future. But it's really so therefore about the work plan element. Tomorrow,
Andrew, there's a bit of interference on your mic. Can you lean over and use Councillor Farwell? Is
that better? Yeah. At tomorrow's meeting, the Scrutiny Committee is reviewing the Oxfordshire Plan 2050, but it came up at fairly short notice, and the officer recommendations are about noting the responses to the consultations rather than substantively engaging with it. Is it your understanding that it will come back to scrutiny again after that?
Well, I would really need the assistance of the scrutiny officer to answer that question, as I'm not chair of the committee either. You're putting me on the spot, but I mean, let us go and see and find out the answer.
Fair enough. And Councillor Gant, I believe you had a second question.
Very wise to rely on the advice of our excellent scrutiny officers at all times. Second question is about paragraph 10 of the report about the Tourism Management Review Group. I had the honour of chairing the original report some 3 years ago, which was then given an update. Obviously, a sector, goes without saying, has been impacted absolutely fundamentally and existentially by COVID. Would the scrutiny committee be minded to commission a new piece of work to look again at how the city regains its preeminence in the tourism market?
Well, you're asking me my personal opinion, because I can't speak on behalf of the committee, because the committee hasn't met to discuss it. My personal view would be, I would be doubtful, actually, as to the value of that at the moment. I mean, there was pretty considerable discussion, and has been discussion, about the economic impact of COVID upon the city, and it falls within the responsibility of the cabinet portfolio holder, who is doing a very good job in this area. So I feel, on balance, it would be for us to commission it. It would be for the cabinet to think about it and to bring proposals back to scrutiny for scrutiny, which would seem to be a more efficient way of doing it.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have any more questions on the work of scrutiny? I confess I'm currently seeing none. I believe we are to vote to note the report. All colleagues in favour thereof? Once again, unanimous. Thank you very much, Andrew. Colleagues, we now have remaining only items 12, public addresses, and 15, the series of motions on notice. We have somewhat less than 10 minutes until 6:30. It's my contention that we are relatively unlikely to get through a full motion in the time available until 6:30. My feeling is that we probably need to break, therefore, a few minutes early and reconvene at 7 sharp. In other words, get back in here by 5 to 7, and we will kick off as soon as we can into that. Thank you very much, colleagues.
At the end of our road.
Thank you very much, colleagues. Please take a seat. Good. So, as colleagues will recall, we are moving, as it were, back in the meeting to item 12, public addresses and questions, of which, as will have been noted, we have 3. The first one that I have listed is an address from Mr. Colin Aldridge. So, David, if Mr. Aldridge is available. Mr. Aldridge, welcome. You're an old hand at this sort of thing, but as you know, time limit of 5 minutes, but please fire away. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Hello. I came here about 2 years ago talking of drug consumption rooms. This time, I'm here to ask the council to try to gain permission for a drug DRC trial in Oxford. Since the Defence of the Realm Act was introduced around the time of the First World War, we have had illegal drugs on our streets. This has led to 4,561 deaths related to drug poisoning in England and Wales in 2020, up 3.8% from the previous year, and the highest number since record began in '93. Criminalising drug use is not working. There are many in society who now realise this course of action needs to change into a health challenge. Forcing people into rehab through criminal justice system does, for the majority, fail as they are not willing participants. We can only improve the situation by having people wanting to change their actions. On Wednesday, 17th of January 2018, There was a debate about drug consumption rooms in which approximately 17 cross-party politicians, a large majority in favour, but as yet nothing has happened. DCRs are used in many different countries around the world. In terms of historical development of this intervention, the first supervised DCR opened in Bern, Switzerland in June '86. Further facilities of this type were established in subsequent years in Germany, the Netherlands, Spain, Norway, Luxembourg, Denmark, Greece and France. A total of 78 official drug consumption facilities currently operates in these countries. Following the opening of the first 2 drug consumption facilities in the framework of a 6-year trial in France, 2016, there were also 12 facilities in Switzerland with much success. This is a big step by itself, to take by itself. Therefore, we need to have a trial to discover for ourselves the benefits and downfalls. Drug consumption rooms can introduce users to a healthier life and reduce the dangers of needles in our parks and streets. Also allowing users to take their chosen poison in a controlled and safer environment. Supplying drugs to users is illegal, which means our government is the only body able to debate and give permission for a trial. A precedent has been set with the trial of e-scooters in Oxford, which has just been extended. In a recent email from MP Layla Moran says, I understand that the Drug Death Task Force set up by the Scottish Government supports the introduction of safer consumption facilities in Scotland. The Drug Death Task Force has recommended that the UK Government consider a legislative framework to support their introduction. I am here to ask all councillors to come together to write a cross-party letter to the Government asking permission for a trial in Oxford City. We have waited long enough. It's time for action. I'm starting a petition asking Parliament to debate this. I will send each of you a link which I hope you will be able to sign and share in whichever way you feel. Thank you for listening.
Mr. Aldridge, thank you very much indeed for that. You'll be aware, as will colleagues, that in principle we have a motion relating to this later on in the agenda, whether or not time actually permits us to get to it. There is, of course, a written response from Councillor Upton, but Councillor Upton, do you want also to add a verbal response?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yeah, Colin, thank you very much indeed for coming along to speak to us this evening. I couldn't agree with you more that drug consumption should be a public health problem and not a crime problem. We don't treat alcoholics as criminals. We shouldn't be treating drug addicts as criminals. Our current drug policy is clearly failing, and if I had the faintest hope that the Shower, who are currently in number 10 Downing Street, could focus on anything sensible and decent, I would set up a group to look at this tomorrow. But I do hope that we will get to this point in the motions in the agenda, because I would really welcome getting a firm steer from the rest of the council about whether they would be happy to take forward, whether we can convene a group of, whether that's going to be counsellors, drug rehabilitation services, potentially the police, other interested parties, to look at applying for doing just such a trial. But thank you again for coming.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Colleagues, as you'll know from the agenda, we are in principle due an address and a question from Mr. Artwell. My understanding is that Mr. Artwell has indicated that he doesn't wish to speak tonight, but David, would you be able to? Mr. Artwell is present and, in fact, will be addressing us. Welcome. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
You have, as you know, 5 minutes for your written statement.
Okay, I'm here with a very heavy heart, wishing to persuade you all to protect female-only spaces. Oxford City Council motion entitled Becoming a Trans-Inclusive Council, which was supported overwhelmingly by the elected councillors, must be rescinded, withdrawn and abandoned by you councillors. Female pupils and women will will encounter intimidation from biological boys and men whilst in traditional single-sex spaces. In the United States, in Loudoun County, a judge found the boy guilty of sexually assaulting a 15-year-old girl. The transgendered boy, who was wearing a skirt, invaded the girls' toilets at Stonebridge High School in the United States, after the Education Board had also authorized boys to invade and disrespect traditional spaces for females only. This frightful sexual assault could, in my opinion, easily occur in Oxford following the Electors Council's decision in November last year to become a trans-inclusive council. In 2020, the elected Oxfordshire County Council ignored the general safety of females and voted to authorise biological boys to access female traditional toilets in schools. Oxford's county councillors' vote to allow boys to access female toilets was successfully challenged by an unnamed 13-year-old pupil who stated that puberty was difficult enough without having boys invading their toilets. In 2020, with enormous support from Oxford's rank and file, this wise 13-year-old crowdfunded and challenged the decision in a judicial review at the High Court. The Oxfordshire girl who brought the judicial review won her case, and she against gays, and she said, all I wanted was them to apologise for trying to push the transgender toolkit on us. It is shocking and unacceptable that the double-dipping county councillors remained silent. Oxford's Feminist Union believes that Oxford City Council assisted the passage of the Trans-Inclusive Council motion. In my opinion, there is ample and empirical evidence of the real and present dangers that biological males pose whilst in traditional female-only spaces and toilets. The prison service reported that biological males in female prisons had raped numerous female prisoners and a female guard. Oxford, with its historic history of abuse of young girls by men, ought to make safeguarding of girls and women a priority. There was no call by the city councillors to protect girls and women from this clear and present threat from the trans inclusion policy. Women have every right to continue to expect women's refuge, sports facilities, female changing rooms, female prisons, rape crisis centres to be female only. All right. For women in the public office to support the transgender inclusion policy is, in my opinion, proof that having ethnic minorities and women doesn't lead to superior, wiser decisions. That 38 Oxford City councillors voted for the trans inclusion policy causes Oxford voters great shame and disappointment, and concern for the public safety of their sisters, wives, mothers, who could be forced to use traditional spaces with biological boys and men. Oxford City Council has nothing to be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Artwell. My understanding is that, Councillor Aziz, you're wishing to give a verbal response.
Yes. Democratic spaces and processes should not be used as a cover for making outlandish, unfounded and deeply problematic statements about anyone, let alone vulnerable minorities such as trans women, men and people. Transphobia or any form of bigotry cannot and must not ever be passed off as freedom of speech. Yet, this is exactly what is happening here tonight, and this is what is happening across the country due to a government stoking its cultural wars on the back of the most vulnerable in our society. There is truly nothing more shameful than denying people's humanity and human rights. There is nothing more shameful than trying to weaponize rape, sexual abuse, and violence against women and girls to further dehumanize trans women, men, and people. Transphobia is a form of misogyny and should be called out for being so. I'm very proud of Oxford City Council for passing a motion to become a trans-inclusive council, and I, along with my colleagues, will be doing everything in my power to work with all elected members to ensure this motion is put into action. Indeed, Councillor Louise Upton and I are due to meet Councillor Lucy Pegg and hopefully Councillor Chris Jarvis, who wrote and proposed the motion, in the next week or so. Thank you, councillors. I'm very proud that Oxford City Council flies a transgender flag over the Town Hall annually on the Trans Day of Remembrance, which is on November the 20th. As we know, this is a day when we honour, mourn and remember the names of our trans siblings who lost their lives in acts of transgender violence. I'm very proud of the fact that this council has approved the creation of a Violence Against Women and task force focused on tackling misogyny across our city. This is, of course, an inclusive and intersectional space which will, of course, include our trans sisters. I'm very proud of the fact that Oxford City Council has elected more councillors of LGBTQIA+ backgrounds from all parties. And before I end, I'd also just like to acknowledge the harm of this so-called speech that's been made this evening and the pain that it must have caused a lot of people in this chamber and those listening. Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues. Thank you, Councillor. Mr. Archwell, I believe you also have a question. I think you have a 3-minute limit on.
Elected councillors, Oxfam has released a report that has been reported by the BBC that states lockdown of small independent businesses has assisted the world's 10 richest men to have more than double their collected fortune since March 2020. For this reason, councillors, the concentration of wealth of planet Earth into the hands and control of a dozen men poses the greatest threat to the continuation of human, plant, and animal life on planet Earth. It comes as a shock that Oxford City councillors do not even try to redress the threat to life on Earth from having over 80% of the wealth of planet Earth in so few hands. Africa contributes the least to climate change, but the Congo's environment and children are exploited horribly to mine the coltan, without which the electric batteries for this city are impossible. Do the councillors understand it is easy for the wealthy to be green, whilst it's almost impossible for the poorly paid? Do councillors agree this level of concentrated wealth is the greatest threat to life on planet Earth?
Thank you very much. The question is, I think, addressed to Councillor Hayes. You have a written response, of course, Councillor Hayes, but do you wish to make an additional verbal response?
If I may, I'd like to read out what I've written.
Yes, by all means.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The greatest threats to the continuation of human, plant and animal life on Earth are climate change, habitat destruction, disease and war. If anyone was in any doubt about their severity, then I would expect the global experience of the past couple of years will have changed that. With a global pandemic that has killed millions, record wildfires in the US, Greece and Siberia, a 12-year record in Amazon deforestation, and vicious conflict in Yemen, Afghanistan, Ethiopia and Armenia. Addressing inequality as well as tackling climate change, boosting biodiversity, sustaining and protecting people through the pandemic, and helping to keep our citizens safe are at the very heart of this council's work. I'm proud that Oxford is home to Oxfam, whose data you report. While working at Oxfam, I led UK campaigning to tackle global inequality, including publishing the annual data reports which you mentioned. We agree on the need to end the rampant inequality we see in the world. We in Oxford may be able to do little to deliver a redistribution of wealth from the world's mega rich, but of course all of us are able to make a difference when it comes to climate change and biodiversity, just as every individual was able to make a difference when it came to controlling the spread of COVID. This is about behaviour change. Reuse is cheaper than replacement, vegetables are cheaper than meat, taking the bus is cheaper than running a car, insulating a loft is cheaper than paying your gas bill. Indeed, for many of our tenants, it is free. But as everyone knows, as those New Year's resolutions begin to fade, behaviour change isn't easy. Oxford's 2019 Citizens' Assembly on Climate Change, which involved a representative group of residents of Oxford of all ages, means and different communities, was in clear agreement that the Council should work, engage and empower all Oxford residents to make those changes that help achieve carbon reduction, while not disadvantaging low-income households in the city. And that's what we are doing with a list of some 60 actions set out in our Zero Carbon Action Plan. One of these relates to helping people insulate and retrofit their homes. We are currently spending £1.6 million to upgrade 365 council homes in the city and have secured a further £1.9 million to support low-income homeowners to install insulation in their own homes. These actions will both cut household bills and reduce carbon impacts. This council will continue to use our own processes, our own partnerships and our work with Oxford's communities to ensure as we cut carbon emissions in Oxford, we take opportunities to enhance residents' standard of living, especially those who are most vulnerable and have low incomes through our climate action. And if I may, Lord Mayor, I thought Councillor Aziz gave an exceptional response there, but she made a point which was around the words that I use can cause hurt, and they can cause hurt to people who are LGBT in this chamber. And I'm proud to be a gay deputy leader. I'm proud to stand alongside our trans brothers and sisters, and I think you should think about the words that you use, and I think you should change the words that you use. Behaviour change isn't just about addressing climate contributions, it's about building a happier, more harmonious society. We just don't need prejudice. So I guess what I'd say is just knock it on the head.
Thank you, Councillor.
Well, you go and protect women and girls then.
I'm sorry, Mr. Archwell, you no longer have the floor. Thank you very much. Thank you, colleagues. We have one item left, and as per usual, it is the final item covering motions. My expectation is that we will have the usual as time for this. We've already had expressed by Councillor Upton the desire that we get as far in the motions as we possibly can, and I would urge colleagues to make that desire as feasible as possible. I would remind colleagues that we have 3 minutes time limit on all speeches in the motions, and I would urge people to be succinct. The first motion, motion A, is the independent group motion, John Radcliffe Hospital Parking. We are kicking off at, I suspect, something like 7:20. We have until 8:20. I believe Councillor Haynes is opening the motion.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. This is a motion for a multi-storey car park for the John Radcliffe Hospital. It is grossly unfair on people who are sick and friends and family of those wanting to urgently visit people in the hospital to allow the situation to continue. An increase in parking capacity would reduce the congestion on local roads, freeing up the road network to other traffic, including buses and ambulances, reduce the pollution inhaled by cyclists, pedestrians and local residents from vehicles queuing with engines running, reduce lost time and missed appointments which cost the health service a fortune, make it easier for staff to access the hospital, helping to reduce staffing shortages, potentially increase parking revenue for the hospital trust from additional vehicle parking. I hope this motion can be carried to resolve this long-standing issue for now and into the future, to alleviate some of the problems that the public so clearly and desperately need. I understand that one of the situations they've mentioned is buses. Well, I'm afraid that County Council have taken off more bus routes and made it more impossible for people to get to the hospital. And I think, quite honestly, this does make a lot of sense to do this. I have a petition here on how many people are interested in signing it. And so far, online, we've got 4,930 people agree that we need one up there, and a paper petition of 1,385, which comes to a total of 6,315 people who all desperately need one up there. And I have not found one single person who said, no, we don't want one up there. It makes common sense to have one, so please vote for one in. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Councillor. Councillor Malik, I believe you are seconding. Do you wish to do that now or reserve the right?
I reserve the right to speak later.
Okay, understood. Thank you. Colleagues, we have a proposed amendment from Councillor Hollingsworth, and I would like to move on to covering that amendment. So, Councillor Hollingsworth, if you would.
Yes, I'll be brief, Deputy Lord Mayor. This slightly unusually constructed motion takes the motion that was passed by this council on the 7th of October, which explicitly voted against increasing car parking at the John Radcliffe, and then adds the extra words about the petition for a multi-storey car park. It doesn't actually explicitly say increase, but it's helpful that the mover of the motion has made it clear, so we're absolutely clear what it is that we're voting on here. My amendment is to restate the long-standing policy of this council, the long-standing policy of Oxfordshire County Council, and of course the Oxfordshire County Council has been doing quite a lot recently to address traffic issues, so I'm very much looking forward to support from the twin hatting bits of the council here. And moreover, I'm moving an amendment which sets out the position supported by Oxford University Hospitals Trust, which also does not wish to increase the car parking on site. And before we were overtaken by the COVID crisis, there were a series of increasingly constructive meetings between the two councils and the Hospital Trust, actually stemming from that original motion, well, preceding the original motion, but which were referred to in the original motion in October 2019. Which were moving towards identifying exactly the kind of sustainable transport solutions which are needed to address the challenges. Obviously, that's been difficult to continue during COVID. The Trust has had other, more important, bluntly, things on its mind for the short term. But it's difficult to see a more important medium to longer term issue, particularly for those people in Marston and Headington through whose neighbourhoods this traffic goes. So I would urge the council to stick to the position that it's always held, to support the position of the trust itself, and to vote for my amendment, and then essentially to restate what we said on the 7th of October 2019.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I think I may have just seen Councillor Hayes wishing to second. Reserving the right or speaking now?
Speak now. Thanks, Lord Mayor. I'll speak briefly in order that we can have a debate. But I think the point that I want to make really is that, as Alex says, there was significant progress being made between the councils and the Trust in coming up with some of the transport solutions we know we all need. And as best they could, the Trust have worked with the councils during the pandemic. So last year we held a Zero Carbon Oxford Summit, to which the Trust came along and were an active contributor. They signed up towards our ambition to be a net zero city by 2040 or sooner. All of the partners in the room were explicit about the fact that this was going to be an exceedingly tall order, but that in order to achieve it, we have to work together, and we must work together to achieve it, because if we don't, we will undermine any prospect of protecting humanity on this planet. They could not have been clearer about that in that meeting and subsequent meetings. And in subsequent meetings, we've adopted the Zero Carbon Oxford route map, which calls for a reduction of transport-related emissions by 88% by 2040. That is a significant tall order that has to be achieved. It's science-based, it's data-led, and the university hospitals have been aware of and supportive of our efforts. Indeed, at the summit, going so far as to say, and I'll read this out, we are committed to making it easier for patients and staff to access our sites, working collaboratively with other local organisations to best serve our population. So I think it is important to restate this council's position. I think it is important to restate our position in line with the county councils, to acknowledge that even during the time of pandemic, where work has paused, there is still that undercurrent of support. And actually, by setting these really tough and tight targets that we need, and we know we need, to redouble all efforts. There are policies that now could be brought forward with the new administration, which, through the statements and the measures and the targets that it's brought forward, seem to suggest that they're far more ambitious than the predecessor, and we certainly welcome that. And I guess the last thing that I would want to say is that we obviously have two significant opportunities to improve bus travel in the city. We have the BSIT plan, which is about improving connectivity and networks and what travel looks like, a significant multi-million-pound investment locally if we can bring that off. And we've also got the Zebra bid, which I referred to in one of my answers to a question I received, which is about achieving a zero-emissions bus fleet. And that would help to bring forward not just better bus travel, not just a better experience for bus passengers, but greater connectivity and a reduction of our emissions, which is what we all want to achieve, including through the restatement of this position.
Thank you very much, Councillor. We move on to a debate on the amendment. Do I have other speakers? I think I saw Councillor Chapman, then Councillor Ross-Smith and Councillor Artafkin.
Yeah, thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. The John Radcliffe Hospital is in the heart of my ward. I'm very proud of it. I'm very proud of the people who work there. And I think we should take every opportunity to thank them for all they're doing. And a number of the access points also pass through it. My view is that while the heart of the motion and its sort of views about the symptoms is fine, its solution is one-dimensional. A multi-storey car park will not do the job. We need a sustainable solution to this, and one which will last over a long period of time, and one which is also environmentally green. So I put 4 suggestions on the table. 1, we need to have better communication about the public bus options that are presently available for patients. When I visited there recently as an outpatient, I had a lot of information about parking, but no information about how I could get there by bus. Secondly, the Trust needs to tackle the issue about phasing of outpatient clinics. It is always said that, the clinics are phased for the benefit of the consultants rather than the patients. I think that would be rather cynical. But I do think there is an issue about where they are phased across the week. And Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, rather than across 3 days, would reduce the level of traffic. Third observation would be, one of the things that puts people off, I think, going by public transport to the John Radcliffe is moving between different parts of the site when they have parked their cars. So can we have some shuttle buses that move people simply and availably between the different parts of the site? That would give people more encouragement to come by bus in the first place. And the fourth issue is the one that Alex has addressed in his amendment, which is shuttle buses moving from key drop-off points around the city on a single stop to the John Radcliffe, using bus lanes to speed up their progress as much as possible. Now, those are 4 thoughts I had this afternoon. I'm not a specialist in this area, but I'm sure if we could put the best brains together from the Hospital Trust, from the City Council, and from the county, we could make some progress on this issue. Because whilst COVID and other distractions is a reasonable excuse for not making much progress over the past 2 or 3 years, I would not like to be in a position to come back to this chamber in 3 or 4 years' time and still be having the same conversation. I mean, the impact on my constituents, upon patients, upon all those associated staff as well, is just too big to tolerate. We cannot have the sort of traffic jams, the air pollution, and the distractions we have at the moment. So I urge all the parties to get together and try and find some really practical solutions to a problem which is eroding the quality of life, not just in my ward, not just in this city, but for all those people who come and visit Oxford as outpatients, and of course the staff who work so hard from all the county sides to come and work in a health service which is under enormous pressure. So that's why I urge action on this matter. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Ross-Smith, and a reminder to colleagues, we are currently debating the amendment as proposed by Councillor Hollingsworth. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. I will just speak to the amendment and reserve my right, hopefully, to speak to the full motion when it's taken. I would totally agree about the shuttle bus. I think it's something I've actually mentioned in this chamber a few years ago, in fact, actually saying that there should be one solution. I think when we were discussing a similar motion before that I would like to see. So I'm delighted that Councillor Hollingsworth has taken that up, put it into the amendment. I would also like to just say that I'm in touch regularly with, in fact, all the health trusts and hospitals in Headington, and we have 6 hospitals in Headington, so there's a lot of traffic movements going on. And there are some times when you are travelling to a hospital where you have no choice but to take a car, for whatever reason. So I don't think we can stop people taking a car to the hospital when they need to. But we do need to make it easier for those that need to take a car to get in. And I'm delighted to say that the Trust has actually recently put in an easier method for those with the blue badge to actually go in and park, so they haven't got to queue up in the queue to get into the main car park now. That is separate, and it has actually made a tremendous difference for those who are less able-bodied and need a blue badge to travel around. So that's a really good thing. The other thing, the good thing that's happened is the ANPR is now live at both the Churchill site and the JR site. Sorry, I'm just looking at my notes. And the new signage is installed and it seems to be working very well. And the last meeting that I had with the Trust on the 12th of January, they were saying that the signage is very good and the You Are Here signs as well, directing people around the site, are also working very well too. The travel and transport team is working to develop new ways for people to pay or register for their vehicles for the free parking as well too. So that should ease things as well too for those that find that cumbersome to do. So I'm in support of this amended motion. I can absolutely tell the Chamber here that local residents in Headington and surrounding areas do not want to see any more cars than necessary piling into the JR site. We are where we are with it. We wouldn't have built the hospital there if we'd had a bit more forethought, but that was the place it had to be because that's where the land was designated for it. But I would happily support this amended motion.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Councillor. I've seen Councillor Al-Attaf Khan. Anybody else wishing to speak on the amendment? I am seeing nobody, so Councillor Al-Attaf Khan.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. It's good to see that administration recognise that the city, county and the trust should be working together. Previously, I heard from this chamber and the other chamber at the county council that the city council is the planning authority and the county is the transport. So to address this problem, this need to be looking all the options, as I think this amendment does direct towards that, looking other options than the multi-story car park. Is not only multi-story car park building and then putting all the cars onto the same roads can't take any more traffic. So my only suggestion, what is already being said, is that if city and county working together with the trust, they should build or ask trust to have a master plan for the Headington area where the 5 hospitals are based. We have invited the trust person into our ward meeting in Headington and asked this question, and it doesn't seem to me that they have a master plan to work. So there is a planning application comes for different reasons and different grounds, and that application is looked for planning matters and then goes through, and the issue of this transport is still lingering for some time. But now, as the administration changed at the county council and the city is looking more working together with the county and with the trust. So I think that's a way forward to work together and have a master plan for these hospital sites and working different type of the ways we can bring people or people can come. I have sympathies for the disabled visitors or the family wanted to come, but they needed to come in a quicker, cleaner and greener way, and that need to be worked by these authorities. Thank you.
Councillor, I've seen nobody else indicating to speak on the amendment debate, and therefore I believe Councillor Hollingsworth to sum up. Would that be correct? Fire away, off you go.
It was kind of my assumption that I was prepared, standing to be corrected. No, it's good, right. I know no more than you. Thank you for the supportive comments. I'll just sort of pick up on a couple of those. The last comment from Councillor Al-Attaf Khan. The motion, as I'm intending to amend it, leaves in the first paragraph, which incidentally I wrote when I amended it on the 7th of October 2019, which sets out the need to work collectively on delivering a master plan. Because you're right, there is an absence of a master plan, and that makes life extremely difficult. I think it's fair to say that progress was being made, and then obviously the pandemic came, and that had to take priority for obvious reasons for the trust. But I think we're beginning to see something less abnormal, I think, rather than normality emerging. And I think now is the right time to reinforce those talks, those conversations, and start bringing that forward. And also, it is good that the new administration at the County Council have added some additional energy and political impetus, but the officer and professional impetus was there before. It's just building on the same thing. In fact, actually, staff turnover is probably more of an issue. So just to reiterate what the amendment does, the amendment essentially says that the solution to cars causing traffic jams is not to build more car parking spaces. It never has been, it never will be. The solution is, as set out in the amended motion, it's to take measures to give different priorities when you allocate a limited number of parking spaces to those that really need it, and that is the patients, that is the staff who need it. And those are all things which can and should be done as part of a master plan. They're things which the Trust has said it can and will do, and I look forward to working with them in order to deliver that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Holdsworth. Colleagues, I've been reminded that if he wishes to exercise it, Councillor Haynes has a right of reply to the amendment. Mick, do you want to reply to it?
Yeah, after hearing today's issue on this, I'm quite willing to go along with Alex's situation, because it's glad to know that lots of people seriously consider this situation, and if they can work together and we can get one solution to all this, then I'm quite happy to go along with it. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor. As colleagues will have heard, Councillor Haynes is accepting the amendment, and I don't even think we have to vote. We do technically have to vote. Let's all vote. Those in favour of the amendment, please show. Okay, once again, unanimous. Yeah. Thank you very much indeed, colleagues. That is very, very clear. We do, of course, need to return to the original amendment, although my hope would be that most of the relevant issues have now been aired. However, even supposing nobody else to wish to speak, Councillor Malik, of course, has reserved his right to speak as seconder. Do I see, Sarge, if you don't mind, before you speak, anybody else wishing to speak, or are we? I'm seeing Councillor Smith. I'm seeing Councillor Smith, I'm seeing Councillor Wolf, I'm seeing Councillor Al-Tafkan. Sarge, you can speak whenever you like, now or at the end. Okay, Councillor Ross-Smith, please.
Thank you. I'd just like to correct one thing, if I could, that was said earlier this evening, and that was the County Council has actually cut the bus services to the JR site. It hasn't. The bus companies have actually, if they've made changes, they've made changes because of something that actually has been mentioned earlier on, I think actually by the leader of this council, was that bus numbers have gone down, unfortunately, through the pandemic, and they're not rising fast enough yet to support the full services that we've had in the past in Oxfordshire, which is a shame.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Wolf, please.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Can I just be clear? Am I speaking to the substantive?
Speaking to the amendment, the motion as amended, full text will be found on page 65.
Yeah, to the substantive, yes. Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you for the contributions. I particularly appreciated Councillor Chapman's constructive comments about sort of actions that could be taken immediately, which were really helpful, I thought. Thank you. I'm afraid I'm going to abstain on this motion, not because I disagree with it, but because it doesn't go far enough. The problem that we have, 22,000 people movements in and out of the site, on a hill, surrounded on three sides by residential housing, and on the fourth side by a hill and trees and stuff like that. The scale of the challenge is way beyond shuttle buses, I have to say. It's certainly cars, that cannot continue, and not, the solution has to be far more radical, I think. So I think, what is the solution that can deliver that number of people in and out of a site like that? Well, the city of Portland, Oregon faced exactly this challenge some years ago. A major university hospital on a hill, surrounded by trees and residential housing. And their solution was to build an aerial tram. It was very controversial. They got it through in the end. An aerial tram which has got the capacity of carrying the equivalent of between 80 and 100 buses an hour, directly almost into the corridor if you wanted. Technically, that is feasible. I am absolutely convinced of that. Whether it's feasible in other senses, land ownership is a particular issue, I think, on the other side of the A40. That's an open question. But as far as I'm concerned, it absolutely has to be addressed. Now, Bruno Holthoff, who was the chief exec of the NHS Trust some time ago, before he left, actually did send somebody to a seminar which Councillor Hollingsworth attended and Councillor Cook and others, about aerial trams, cableways and things like that. So he was interested at that point, and I've heard nothing since. I've not done any work on that myself, apart from speak on radio about it. But I think unless that is seriously looked at, nothing else is going to solve this problem, frankly. And for that reason, I'm afraid I'm going to abstain. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor. I have Councillor Altaf Khan next. I've also seen Councillors Hollingsworth and Hayes.
Thank you. I accept the situation from October 2019 have changed, or the talk started and did not progress as it should have. I also heard the emission needed to be reduced because of the cars. It's not only car emission at the JR and other hospital site. Some of the councillors may be familiar. There is a report about these energy pipes which were laid down through Headington and Trust did not achieve the emission target. So in this full motion, and again, which Alex Hollingworth gave the assurance that there will be speed up and working on the master plan. And that master plan should address the emission of all the sites and the car parking situation which we are talking in this motion. But as there is saying, the devil is in details, so that master plan will have the details. So we have to work and come up with that which is accepted by this city, county and the trust and the people of the Oxford city, and especially the people of Headington surrounding who are there day in, day out. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Altaf Khan. As I say, I have Councillors Hollingsworth and Hayes. I have Councillor Malik to sum up. Given that I think I sense that we are much of a mind on this, we can probably keep it fairly short.
I'm trying to get Councillor Wolfe back into the fold. If you read my carefully drafted amendment, it includes the words "such as," which means that the two things I included, which were the direct bus links and the shuttle bus, aren't the only things which could be included. While I am profoundly sceptical of the practicality, utility or deliverability of Councillor Wolfe's scheme, it's still covered by the great weight being carried by the words "such as." So I'm hoping he can now vote for it. On Councillor Altaf Khan, I mean, I think a master plan obviously has to look at the building strategy. This motion is about the transport strategy. So it's not, my amendment didn't make any reference, but it's quite clear that they also need to look at the building strategy for operational reasons as well as the kind of emissions reasons you've talked about.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Inviting Wolfe back into the fold. Interesting strategy. Councillor Hayes.
Thanks. And very much on that theme, I want to thank Councillor Haynes for agreeing to the amendment. I think it sends a really strong signal to those who are watching here from OUH, and I think it's important that we do show as much unanimity as we can. On Councillor Wolfe's suggestion, literally blue skies thinking, which I'm a fan of, I would endorse what Alex has said around the weight that could be placed on such as, and I would also say that while I'm also sceptical, you have in the County Council an alliance between the Labour Party, the Liberal Democrats, and your own party. So were you to support this, you could, of course, use your leverage within that administration to try and position your preferences. And I think the last thing I would want to say, again in the spirit of consensus, is to endorse what Councillor Ross Smith said, that it was not the County Council that had made the cut to the bus service, but to say that the perception only arises, I think, because the press release which went out bore the quote from one of your colleagues, and so that's probably why that perception is there. And of course, we hope that there'll be no further cuts to bus services and that we can get those bus prioritisation measures and other measures that we need to reduce car use, including the reduction of car parking at the JR. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Malik, please.
Thank you very much, Deputy Lord Mayor. Yeah, I think make acceptance of the amendment and the debate we had and everybody given the comment, that sends a message, strong message out. We all care about our dear city, what is best for our city. And the idea is, like when you talk about the master plan, obviously the connection is very important from getting all the sides, especially from park and ride, if you don't want people to drive into it. So these are those essential things. So as long as the people can be transported into the hospital, and that I think, I'm sure, in the master plan, city, county, and the OUCH will look into it. So thank you very much. I think we end up on a good note. So I'm hoping Councillor Wolf will also vote for it. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Councillor Malik. We have very nearly ended up on a good note, but Councillor Haynes, of course, has the opportunity to sum up on the debate, should he so wish. Mick, do you want to say anything else? Splendid. We can move to a vote, colleagues. All those please in favour of the motion as amended.
You really don't want to draw a wolf into the fold, I tell you.
That's 39. Those against? I'm seeing none. Anybody abstaining? Et voilà. Possible to cover at least two more. We're moving on to motion B, elections bill, which is proposed by Councillor Jafari Marbini, also amended. You possibly want to speak to that first.
Yes, if you turn to page 68 on the briefing notes, that's what I will be speaking towards. If you could just, on the brief, sorry, can you hear me now? Sorry, am I in the wrong, hang on. Is that better? Okay, so if you turn to page 68 of the briefing note, that is the amended motion that I will be speaking to.
In effect, as I understand it, the Councillor has accepted her own amendment, which is within her rights to do, and we are now therefore speaking on the amended motion to be found on page 68. The floor is yours.
Thanks very much. Well, we've all heard and seen how we're in the midst of a hailstorm of Cakegate, Partygate, tasteless Wallpapergate. But one thing that has not been spoken about greatly is how very competent this government, and in fact Boris Johnson, is at performative cruelty. He is very competent, him and his government are very competent at eroding the fabric of our fragile democracy. They are very competent at creating diversions. Everyone, whichever focus group, if you believe in focus groups, quicksand, will all agree, wherever you are in politics, our systems are not working. We've had an election of a lying Prime Minister. He has lied in every single profession he has belonged to. He was discussing beating up a journalist that was recorded, but yet all of this was dismissed at the time. And there has been the promotion of Chris Dick. This has been going on since 2005, and the shooting of an innocent man, Jean-Charles de Menezes. He was denied justice via character assassination that was led from the top. And Chris Dick was actually promoted to the highest office in the Met Police, as opposed to being held to account. So it's been going on for an awfully long time. At the moment, a third of all judicial reviews that asylum seekers have to go through, horrendous, uncertain times, against the Home Office, these are settled, a third of them are settled or decided in the claimant's favour. And all that uncertainty and pain that they go through. These bills will limit accountability further. The Judicial Review Bill, the Police Bill, the Elections Bill, and the Nationality and Borders Bill, which this Council has already spoken and voted against as much as we can, it will also cut off public access to information, make it harder to challenge injustice in court. It will give new powers to deprive citizenship without notice. It will criminalise those seeking sanctuary, and it will affect the marginalised worse, the Gypsy, Roma and traveller communities, and our black and brown citizens and residents. And you might ask, in whose interest is this? This is definitely not in the interest of those living in poverty, over 2 million people living in poverty, working families, marginalised communities, those that are affected by the policies. For example, the hike in national insurance by 10%, which will only increase power in the establishment, and it will benefit those who are wealthiest. You might think, well, why do we care? Because we're all the canary in the coal mine. there is the narrowing of a definition of a citizen will affect us all. You might not be the brainwashed Shamima Begum. You might not be a freezing cold asylum seeker. But you might have a brown or black neighbour who might be affected by this, who might be affected by the racist stop and search policies which have not been effective. You might know a domestic violence victim who knows of a presence of a knife, but now is going to be criminalised for that. I now have rights, even though I arrived by a family reunion because I'm a good migrant. But how long will that continue for? How did we get here? It has been decades of racism and xenophobia, and now government-manufactured antipathy against judicial reviews and human rights, and calling all those who fight for social justice woke. Just to sum up, we need to learn from the youth in our city. I'll come back to that point at the end. Please support this motion.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Councillor. Do we have a seconder? Yes, Councillor. Councillor Arshad to second, I believe.
Thank you. So obviously the government claims that this new rule will help eliminate voter fraud, but statistics show that there are very few instances of this taking place, and that introducing ID checks will prevent some people, particularly those with disabilities or from marginalised groups, from voting in elections. Changing the law to force people to show photo ID to take part in UK elections will be catastrophic for ethnic minority communities, increasing barriers to access and in effect disenfranchising them. Also, it will disproportionately impact ethnic minorities and working class communities. Many voters do not have photo ID, and that ownership of ID can differ by socio-economic groups, with citizens from BAME communities at particular and potential disadvantage, and those with protected characteristics. The current proposal suggests a negative disposition towards voters at a time when the trust in politicians and the democratic process is quite low. So I would happily second this motion, and I would urge everyone to please also vote in favour. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. We're moving to debate. I spotted Councillor Smoten, Councillor Hollingsworth. I just spotted Councillor Landell-Mills and Councillor Mundy. Councillor, who was first? Smoten, I think.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing this motion. I think it's very, I think it's a very welcome motion, speaking against some truly foul tactics being deployed to weaken our democracy in a way which I think is, I hope we're all agreed, is extremely unwelcome. I wanted to note also that the elections bill not only tried to chip away at the fabric of our democracy, but it also passed up a tremendous opportunity to strengthen it. This relates to an anniversary, which I think is worth noting, or near enough, is that it is a year and 10 days ago that our colleagues who are in Welsh local authorities gained the right to pick councillors in their council chambers proportionate to the vote of the people. And that, I think, is the new clause that should have been, and the opportunity that our government passed up to dramatically strengthen that principle of one person, one vote, and that all those votes should be of equal power. Nonetheless, I won't try and crowbar it into what is a narrowly constructed motion. I will bring a separate motion on that particular topic. I hope councillors would consider supporting such a motion. But returning to the text that we have in front of us, thank you again for giving us this opportunity to speak on what are frankly Trumpian tactics, and I'll be very glad to oppose those by supporting the motion, and I hope everybody present will do so as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. So I have at the moment Councillors Hollingsworth, Landell-Mills, Mundy, and I believe Jarvis as well. Councillor Hollingsworth.
I'm going to be very brief, just some numbers. I like numbers. 99 number of Conservative MPs who voted against asking people to show ID in the form of a COVID passport to get into a nightclub. 2, the number of Conservative MPs who voted against forcing people to show photographic ID to vote. With the exception of those two, and I'm not going to name them because one of them is appalling and I don't want to give him any kudos. I think the question that it begs is who benefits and who is it that benefits from attempting to disenfranchise millions of people for a problem that literally does not exist. This is a shameful attack on democracy.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Landell-Mills, if you would. Tom, if you could use your microphone.
I have little to add to what's already been said. I think we fully support this motion, which is obviously a naked attempt to gerrymander the electoral process in the most despicable way, and as simple as that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Admirably succinct. Councillor Mundy.
So I'd also like to speak in favour of this amended motion and just talk a little bit about the police crime sentencing in courts bill and the immigration and borders bill. So the people of Oxford over the last year have expressed themselves through protest about both of these bills. Most recently, the Oxford Student Union called a protest on Broad Street, which called for the Lords to throw out the immigration and borders bill. The PCSC persecutes minorities by increasing police powers. It criminalises Gypsy, Roma and traveller communities for their way of life. It places potentially greater punishment on defacing statues than on a conviction for rape. The bill attempts to criminalise inconvenience caused by our right to protest. The government, as has been referred, would rather defend the right of the individual not to wear a mask or take a COVID test, while still trampling on the freedom of our people to express opposing views to their own. The Immigration and Borders Bill attempts to reverse our international commitment to the rights of people to claim asylum. Despite catastrophic failures by Western powers, including the UK, to protect civilians from enormous harm, in many cases resulting from the imperialist aggression, our government seeks to ignore the needs of people fleeing the devastation of those wars. The persecution of despotic regimes and the impact of environmental disasters. These are often caused or exacerbated by climate change. And as we know, the warming of our planet and increasing CO2 levels is being caused by a fossil fuel industry and historic high emissions from industry that is based and financed predominantly in the global north, where the UK is, of course. All the while, it is nations in the global south that suffer most from the consequences of this, and that is, of course, where we get the most asylum applications from. So, yeah, we must support this bill and support the message about the PCSC bill and the Immigration and Borders bill. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Jarvis, please.
Thank you. I'll be brief as well, just wanted to start by thanking you for bringing this motion, which I think is really important. It's great to have before us, and great to hear the consensus that there is in this chamber. The only thing I really wanted to add to this is to highlight that with our current government, it's easy to see them as uniquely awful in the things that they're doing, and the piece of legislation they've been highlighted in this motion are uniquely pernicious and awful. But I think we also need to see this as part of a wider trend and a trajectory that we've seen over the last decade of the undermining of our democracy, of the undermining of civil rights from the Conservative Party. We had the Lobbying Act, which has gagged charities and campaign groups and civil society from holding government to account and from doing campaigning work. We've seen anti-trade union legislation, which has fundamentally undermined the right of workers to come together to collectively bargain and to have freedom of association. We've had major restrictions and reductions in the franchise, first in the form of the individual electoral registration, and now, of course, in the new elections bill. This is part of a wider trend that we have seen since the Conservatives have come to power in 2010. And from my perspective, this aggressive shrinking of the franchise is being, and this aggressive attack on civil rights and civil liberties and of democracy is done for one reason, and that's that the Tories know that when there are more people who are eligible to vote, when there are more people able to hold them to account, to engage through civil society, to engage in democracy, it's more likely that they'll be booted out of office. And so I think it's really important that we take this stance today and oppose all of these pieces of pernicious legislation through this motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Do we have any more people wishing to speak on this debate, on this motion? I am currently seeing none. And so, Councillor Jafari Mabini, could you sum up?
Yes. Thank you all for your support. I mean, it's clear where we are and to some extent how we got here. It's clearly all about despising scrutiny and rejecting accountability. But how do we go forward from here? Arundhati Roy is one of my favourite authors, and she talks about a pandemic portal. The pandemic has revealed inequalities. We must use it to see and visualise better. The Black Lives Matter protests that seemed like many, many months and years ago during the pandemic really showed us, all of our young people in the city, for once town and gown were united around a fight for social justice and an end to racial injustice and inequity. We have also seen the amazing demonstrations by the young people of Oxford in Help the World Oxford, who have come to speak about the daily brutality that our Palestinian people suffer at the hands of the Israeli government. Our young people know that all of our causes are global, oppressions are linked, and that actually, if you think about it, we do need to stop our slumber and think about how the arc of the moral universe bends towards justice. And by that, I mean that we all need to really support our young people, join the movements that we've seen, join Black Lives Matter, Sisters Uncut, the climate justice movements that we see all the time in our city, and think about the words of Frederick Douglass: if there is no struggle, there is no progress. Those who profess to favour freedom and yet depreciate agitation are men who want crops without ploughing up the ground. They want rain without thunder and lightning. They want the ocean without the awful roar of its many waters. This struggle may be a moral one, or it may be a physical one, or it may be both moral and physical, but it must be a struggle. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Colleagues, we move to a vote on the motion as amended. Okay, you were voting early, weren't you, Councillor? All those in favour? Thank you very much, Andrew. So passed there unanimously. Thank you very much, colleagues. My feeling is that we have a good 15 minutes remaining in the time allotted to motions. That is plenty enough time to fit in at least one more. So, Councillor Gant, lift the ban for asylum seekers.
Thank you very much, Deputy Lord Mayor. Can you hear me okay with this microphone? Okay. Certain amount of overlap with the last motion, which is welcome. It's worth referring to the legislation that this motion refers to. The official guidance issued by the Home Office and updated on the 4th of May 2021 says that it, quote, tells you about handling requests for permission to work from asylum seekers, failed asylum seekers, and those who have submitted protection-based further submissions. And it goes on, those who claim asylum in the UK are not normally allowed to work whilst their claim is being considered. They're instead provided with accommodation. The policy outlining when permission to work will be granted is set out in the immigration rules. This outlines that the Home Office may grant permission to work to asylum seekers whose claim has been outstanding for more than 12 months through no fault of their own. Well, let's leave on one side the deliberate and prominent use of words like failed and fault. That style of using language is depressingly familiar from this government, and it's deplorable, but it's not our concern here. The guidance then goes on to give the objectives of the policy as follows. Quote, ensure a clear distinction between economic migration and asylum that discourages those who do not need protection from claiming asylum to benefit from economic opportunities they would not otherwise be eligible for. 2, prevent illegal immigration for economic reasons and protect the integrity of the asylum system. And 3, be clear that asylum seekers can undertake volunteering. In other words, it is a hostile, protectionist, discriminatory barrier thrown up around the world of paid work. And who could it possibly benefit? Those already in the jobs market who might, we are told, suffer from increased competition for economic opportunities? Hardly. All are free to compete in the market in a full and open way. Employers? Exactly the opposite. The rules actively prevent them from using their judgment to hire the best people and deliver the best results for their business and society as a whole. Asylum seekers? Who can believe that being forced to survive on £5.66 a day and not even be allowed to try to contribute to their own upkeep and to the society which they thought would welcome them is a good thing? It can only lead to marginalisation, hardship and failure. And that, of course, is exactly what this government wants and why it is doing this. Oxford thinks differently. We believe that being able to contribute fully to society is a mark of humanity and civilization and brings economic and social benefits. I can do no better than quote the words of the Lift the Ban Coalition. We believe that people who have risked everything to find safety should have the best chance of contributing to our society and integrating into our communities. This means giving people seeking asylum the right to work so that they can use their skills and live in dignity. I commend the motion to the Chamber.
Thank you. Thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you very much, Councillor. I believe Councillor Ross Smith is seconding now or later.
I'm happy to second the motion and reserve my right to speak later.
Thank you very much, Councillor. The motion is open to the floor. Any speakers? Councillor Mundy, and just ahead of Councillor Pegg. Councillor Mundy, please.
Yeah, thank you. So I'd like to speak in favour of the motion. I volunteered for Asylum Welcome for 4 years as an education advisor, so I met a lot of the refugee community in Oxford who they support. They do fantastic work. They also advocate on behalf of refugee rights as well, and I've been doing so in Oxfordshire since the early 1990s. There are socially very regressive views about asylum seekers and refugees that are inflamed by poor policy and hysterical right-wing rhetoric. And where there is not outright hostility and ignorance, there can be a misunderstanding about asylum seekers and their need to be supported by the state. That people who have escaped war, persecution, environmental disaster do not have anything to offer their new home or host nation. The truth is that asylum seekers are like those of us in this room, and everyone, caught up in circumstances that many of us could not possibly imagine. People come with wildly different work and educational experiences, from PhD-educated professors, engineers, to people who are barely literate in their own language. Most people come with important working experience, with skills that will contribute to our community, and as the motion states, will bring positive outcomes for our community and for the local and national economy. All of this at a time when job vacancies have been reported to be extremely high. So we must advocate for the right to claim asylum, which is threatened by the government legislation we discussed in the last motion. And our government needs to be a voice of reason, not hysteria, while engaging with our European neighbours around the issue of forced migration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I have Councillor Pegg, and I've also seen Councillor Rowley. Councillor Pegg, please.
I'll be speaking in support of this motion, and I want to thank Councillor Gant for bringing it to Council. As with the previous motion we heard, this highlights the plight of refugees in the UK who come to our country seeking sanctuary from violence, discrimination and war. But they come here with hope, but then they find themselves neglected and demonised by our government. Of course, asylum seekers should be able to work. I think to most people here that's quite obvious. Even more so when they're being forced to live on just £5.66 a day. I don't really see why we wouldn't want to make the most of their skills, especially when that would also allow asylum seekers a better standard of living, better mental health, and better integration into the community. This only benefits, the current ban on them being able to work, only benefits a government who couldn't care less about the lives and well-being of refugees, of people who are just seeking a better life. For the good of refugees and for the good of the community, I would encourage all councillors to support this motion.
Thank you very much, Councillor. As I say, I have Councillor Rowley, also Councillor Jafari Marbini, and I also have several councillors. Exactly, sorry. Fire away.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor. Many years ago, I used to go and visit people who were detained in Campsfield House prison just north of Oxford, Immigration Removal Centre, as they call it. And one of the people who I spoke to was there essentially because he had got a job and gone to work illegally because of the conditions of his being in the country didn't allow him to work. In other words, he had been locked up because he had tried to get himself a job to earn his own money so that he didn't depend entirely on the taxpayer. And for this reason, he was put in a prison at considerably greater cost to the taxpayer than any money that is spent on the average British citizen. So don't make the mistake that I'm sure we won't. Nobody should think that the immigration policy this particular government is putting forward is based on a rational calculation as to how to best distribute or conserve scarce resources. It is not. It is based perhaps on a calculation as to certain constituencies they wish to appeal to, but not only in its effect, but also in its intention, it is racist, and we must call it out for what it is.
Thank you very much, Councillor. As I say, Councillors Jafari Marbini and Walcott, do I have other speakers, apart from, of course, from Councillor Ross Smith too? And yes, we also have Councillor Aziz. So I suggest Councillor Jafari Marbini, Councillor Walcott, Councillor Aziz, Councillor Smith, if she wishes to do her seconding.
Thank you for bringing this motion and the speeches that have been made already. There's a couple of issues, really. I mean, the asylum system, as many of us who volunteer or have been subject to it know, there is a deep quagmire where you're lost in a maze that is never ending. And my family's story is actually, we were one of the lucky ones, so to speak, but despite that, what stays with me, and I really hope that everyone can empathise with this, is a kind of pain for a loss of a home that never leaves you. And I think that kindness and empathy needs to be at the heart of everything we do, and I hope it is the case here. But I know it's not the case, for example, in lots of our asylum seekers, unfortunately, because there is actually a hell of a lot of Islamophobia around and structural racism. So that actually is already embedded for Muslims who have lived in this country for generations. For example, I'm sure you've all seen the recent data around Bangladeshi Brits who were multiple times, I think it was 4 times more likely to die. There are lots and lots of data around how difficult it is for someone called Mohammed, which is my father's name, to get a job. And it is astonishing that structural racism exists to that extent, and all of us are within our professional networks, I'm sure, are able to change that, even if it is by not doing that nod on the shoulder, that tap on the shoulder of someone that you like and you know and you go to the pub with, that you think would be better than having an open application. Or what happens actually quite often in a lot of places, including my own hospital, where a job description is essentially written for a person that you like and you get on with and you approve of. And let's just call it what it is. So the Middle East has burnt. The UK has had a massive role in that. And whilst that has happened, Islamophobia has risen and risen and risen in this country, whereby now there are people, and unfortunately some, that have been readmitted to the Labour Party too, a man called Trevor Phillips, who spoke of a nation within a nation. And these talking points have been taken up by the far right, who are causing so much damage and violence to our society. So I really implore you all to think about what you can do in your own circle to change structural racism. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. We have technically 3 minutes to go, so I'm sure that colleagues will be happy to extend that hour. And I have Councillor Walcott, Councillor Aziz, and I believe Councillor Smith.
Thank you. I'm really glad that this motion came. I don't really like talking about my own personal life at all, but I think it's very relevant and important here. My dad came to this country to do his master's from what was Sudan in the 80s, and he was a professor there. He came, did his master's, and then unfortunately the second civil war happened in our country, so he wasn't able to go back. And my mum and my sister were in what is Sudan, and they were able to come over as part of his visa as a student, but he was unable to go back because that's what happens when conflict starts. It just happens, these external things, and we know it's all remnants of colonialism, but the way it impacts people, it impacts families, it's something you'll never really truly understand. And it wasn't actually, it's one of the reasons I'm so involved in perhaps now politics now, is it wasn't until my parents were able to find a Labour MP to advocate for them, to help them get refugee status, to actually help my sister be able to get free school meals. It's things like that that stop people from having that humanity, from just being able to live, to work, to not have to work in the informal economy. We talk about crime and we see black and brown people always being stopped and searched and always being arrested when it's not that they're not making good choices, it's that there hasn't been good choices made for them. And that's a very different situation and circumstance to find yourself in. And I'm really glad that we've brought this. I'm glad we're able to talk about it. But it's like, as Hosni has said, it's all the other issues to do with structural racism that we want to challenge as well as a group, cross-party. So I'm just really pleased that this is happening today.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Aziz.
Yes, thank you. So on one hand, we are constantly told that asylum seekers and refugees are coming here to take our jobs, migrants are coming here to take our jobs, and then we see that actually it's this government that is denying the basic human rights to people who are coming here, often escaping the very violence that our government has actually unleashed on them through a horrific foreign policy that, quite frankly, is not working and has created record numbers of refugees around the world. I think it's really important that this motion has been brought to this council chamber, so I'd like to thank the councillor for doing that. I think it's really important that we as a city, a very international city that is recognised as an international city, continues to join up the dots between what's happening internationally and what's happening here in our country. I also think it's really important for us to challenge the stereotypes and the tropes about refugees and migrants and asylum seekers. Asylum is a right that is enshrined in international law, and no level of shameful politicising of that international law should be accepted. We've already heard from colleagues in this chamber about their personal connection to this motion. I'm also the proud daughter of economic migrants. And when my dad first came to this country, like many people, he was subjected to grotesque levels of racism. On the windows of shops and cafes and pubs, it said no Irish, no dogs, no blacks, and I won't use the other word that was put there. Horrifically, because of the political trajectory in our country, all our rights are being rowed back. So I think we need to be really, really aware of that and not just see this as a motion about some people over there. This connects to all our rights, and it connects to us trying to build a city here that is a place where everyone can thrive. I will end up by saying that earlier on this evening, rather shamefully, we had to listen to a man making horrific statements about minoritized people, and we saw the way he was conflating language, horrific and violent language. And I think this type of violent language is being constantly used, and dehumanizing language has been constantly used when it comes to asylum seekers and refugees in particular, and migrant communities. So again, I'm really proud of this motion and I'd like to back it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Colleagues, we do technically have to extend the time. I believe we've now more or less reached 20 past. I am hoping that colleagues will be happy to do that. I'm certainly seeing no objection to it. My understanding in any case is that Councillor Smith remains to speak as seconder, and I would expect after that to move to the summation by Councillor Gant.
Thank you. Fellow councillors, thank you for the support that's been given this evening to this motion. I expect Councillor Gant will actually admit that it was myself that wrote the motion and got him to propose it, because I wasn't sure at the time if I was going to be able to make this evening's meeting. So I feel it's my motion too, so absolutely want to second it. Can I say thank you to Councillor Munday for being a volunteer at Asylum Welcome. I really admire their work. And indeed, we had Asylum Welcome come and speak to residents in Headington in one of our ward council meetings, and it was very inspiring. And I think a lot of people in Headington that were at that meeting actually are now giving financial support to Asylum Welcome and making it much more of a subject that people can talk about. And I'm really pleased to hear some of the comments that have been made this evening. Councillor Rowley, thank you for your account of the asylum seeker that was imprisoned for seeking for work. That's absolutely awful, it really is. Well, fellow councillors, this government seems to be able to change policy if it thinks it's in their electoral interest. I'm thinking here, councillors, about the continued employment in the NHS for those not wishing, for their own reasons, not to be vaccinated. Seems they've changed that policy. Could the same government change their policy and give asylum seekers the opportunity to work? I sincerely hope so. Research has shown huge support, over 71%, as Councillor Pegg mentioned, there is a huge support for a change in policy to allow asylum seekers settled in this country to work rather than rely on handouts. The benefits are listed within the Lift the Ban Coalition's report, and I'd like to highlight a few. It would give asylum seekers the opportunity to use their skills and make the most of their potential, strengthen their chances of being able to integrate into their new communities, allow them to live in dignity and to provide for themselves and their families. And it would improve their mental health. I know what it's like to seek work and to juggle on a tight budget. It drains you, and sometimes you feel like there's no light at the end of the tunnel. A policy change would also benefit our country's economy. The report estimates there will be net gains for the government of 97.8 million a year. 97.8 million a year, a benefit for this country, and so many more benefits by allowing asylum seekers the right to work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Gant, to summate, please.
Thank you very much, Deputy Lord Mayor, and thank you very sincerely to all colleagues for their contributions to this debate, and indeed to Ros for writing the motion. Particularly, if I may, to those who've shared their own personal stories. That's a brave thing to do, and it puts what we say here into context. But we are agreed about this, but let's agree about something else. It's quite easy for us in this chamber to pat ourselves on the back and feel good about something. Let's go out and do something about it. And let's begin by remembering that the City Rector reminded us earlier in this meeting that yesterday was the anniversary of the ending of the career of another leader who tried to ride roughshod over the democratic processes of Parliament, King Charles I. Now, I hope that even the Tory party would no longer defenestrate its leaders quite as terminally as that. But let's face it, he's got to go. Please support the motion.
Thank you very much indeed, colleagues. We move to a vote on the motion as a whole. Those in favour, please show.
39, which is everyone, Deputy Lord Mayor.
Once again, unanimous, which feels like a thing I have been saying quite often this evening. Councillors, colleagues, thank you very much for a remarkably straightforward meeting. And I look forward to seeing you again in a few weeks' time for what will no doubt be an equally as straightforward budget meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Deputy Lord Mayor.